It's a party here once again on a Wednesday night.
Join us in our clubhouse.
Have either one of you done that?
I just installed it tonight, and I did one dog walk with it, and just listening. I'm not going to say anything for a while. Just listening, and I have not yet seen why people like it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. It just, I need more time with it.
Before you tell me anything about it, I'm going to tell you what I think it is based on nothing other than like third degree tweets about Clubhouse.
Okay.
My impression, like multi-degree separated, is that it's a thing where people are either lurking like you or are on audio speaking. And it's like imagine if you had a Skype call, but instead of there just being the three of us on the Skype call, there were 50 of us on the Skype call. And probably there's some way to determine who is allowed to speak at various times and who is ever going to be allowed to speak or whatever. But in general, like a bunch of people in a big audio chat room. And the draw is that sometimes famous people come in and say things in real time that are really dumb, that aren't recorded for posterity because people don't know how to record audio on their devices yet. And it's exciting to hear famous people talk, just kind of like the same way it was exciting on Twitter to see a famous person type something, like that they wrote themselves, presumably. It brought you closer to famous celebrities than going through their publicists back in the day. Now you can hear them on audio. Presumably the next step is chat roulette, where we get to see random people on video, and then just, how that ends. That's my impression. How close am I to what Clubhouse actually is?
Again, based on one evening of listening to it, that seems about right. But again, I don't want to be one of those people who like makes broad proclamations about this thing, and then like 2 months later, I'm proven grossly wrong, and everyone's using my clip, and they're worth $10 billion, and everyone's like, "Oh, look at this podcaster who didn't get it because it attacked podcasting." Like, I have absolutely zero interest in it. The only reason that I asked a friend for an invitation is because everyone's saying this is going to like disrupt podcasts, and I figured, well, I'm in the podcast business. I should probably know about this. I should probably have some knowledge of this thing that has the risk of disrupting my business, or at least changing what my business needs to be. And I think the risk of that is actually pretty low, honestly. Like, based on my listening to it for, again, one afternoon, it seems like it's a very different kind of thing. And as a podcast listener, I mean, we've all, dear podcast listeners out there who listen to this show, you all like podcasts. But we've seen over the years many businesses and apps and startups and things like that seem to be designed by people who hate podcasts to try to make it easier for them to somehow get value out of podcasts while hating them. This seems like it might be in that ballpark. And so for people who actually really love podcasts, I don't think this is going to be for you in the same way that it hasn't really caught on for me yet, because the whole time I'm listening to it, I'm thinking of all the things about podcasts that I miss. Now, this could, again, like, this take could age poorly. When new things come out, people often, just complain that they're not enough like the old things they're used to. So I'm aware that this could be a bad take. This could take off and be huge, and I could be totally wrong, and I could be cringing listening 10 years from now at this take I'm having right now. But so far, when I listen to Clubhouse, I guess when I'm on there, I don't know what the verb is. When I'm listening to a Clubhouse club room, I just miss podcast luxuries. I miss things like pausing and speed control and people who have some kind of production value and audio quality in their show, and people who perform editing for content. I miss all the things that make podcasting really good. And in some ways, like when we moved from old media to new media, in many ways, think about, when we moved from magazine articles to blog posts, it's like, here's this thing that this old need was being served this way. In this new way, you aren't limited to like the bounds of a magazine or what one publisher selected or, what 10 authors wrote. You can read something from anybody, and it can be any length it needs to be, and it can be published as often as it needs to be published, and you can index it and search it, and like all these luxuries you got via technology. I feel like if what you're looking for is podcast like entertainment or information or conversation or amusement, Clubhouse is like the opposite. It's like going a step backwards. It's like going back in time to like AM talk radio shows, but by amateurs. Now, people said a lot of this exact same stuff about podcasts when they were new. Lots of like radio people said podcasts were like, crappy productions of people who were boring and, yammering on forever. So like, I get why I should probably not be saying all this stuff, but it's so far, it's the best analogy I can give is like, I've never been one of the people, and I think this makes me weird, not them, but I've never been one of the people who sits down and just turns on the TV and watches, quote, what's on. When I want to watch something, I sit down, I seek out a particular thing I want to watch, or I browse for like, what's available right now, what's new, and I pick a show and I watch that show. I don't just turn on like a channel and see what's on. I recognize that makes me the weirdo because it seems like almost everyone else is the opposite. But podcasting to me is like the radio or audio version of selecting a specific thing you want to hear because you care, and you will seek out those things and you will listen to them, and you will listen straight through, and you don't want to miss a few minutes when you're like pausing and having to talk to somebody in the street or getting out of your car for a few minutes or whatever. You want to pay attention. To me, Clubhouse is the just sit back and watch whatever's on of audio. And that's fine. There's a huge market for that probably, but I'm not in it.
Yeah, the chat room is all talking about introverts and extroverts, which is exactly what I was thinking when you're describing it, because I feel like a lot of the sort of foundational technologies of the internet, if you squint at them, kind of look like things made to fit within a stereotypical introvert's lifestyle and worldview. And the example I was thinking of for Clubhouse is the opposite of that, which is it's getting dangerous close to being on a phone call. So is it because a bunch of introverts made the internet? I don't know. I mean, that's probably not true, but like it's true that sending an email is less pressure than being on a real-time phone call. It's true that asynchronous communication is less pressure than synchronous communication in whatever form it's in, right? It's true that being in your house in your pajamas is more comfortable than having to get dressed up and go to an office. Like all that stuff, like technology and lots of foundational internet communication mediums and protocols are ideally suited to people who don't want to interact with people all that much. And that probably means that the portion of the population that doesn't like that is served by those technologies. And so as technology improves and we can better serve the desires and needs of people who do want to socialize, I think that's probably a good thing for technology. I mean, in the podcast analogy, a podcast is like they don't know you're listening to them, and you can listen to them at your leisure, how you want, where you want, with no pressure, and feel like you have this relationship with these people who are in your ears, but never have to actually meet them or talk to them. And, just like watching a TV show or a movie or reading books, that is an ideal relationship with creations and creators for a lot of people. But for other people, it isn't. And they want to talk to people and have an exchange and, socialize essentially only over the computer. And podcasts don't fill that need, and email doesn't fill that need, and text messaging even doesn't fill that need when it's, minutes or hours between messages. But real-time audio communication fills that need. It's like, well, don't we already have real-time audio communication? Isn't that just a phone call? Yes, but what if it could be like a party line? Do you remember those from the 80s where there'd be like a party line telephone where everyone would call up and then there'd be a bunch of people talking on the phone at the same time? Someone who has better knowledge of 80s party line history can probably point to some cool web page going deep on what those were like. And that was more of a free-for-all. I'm sure Clubhouse is more refined than that. But I think services, protocols, or as they say in the chat room, features, if this is not a product, then maybe it's a feature that will quickly be, stolen by all the bigwigs. So eventually Instagram will have clubhouses and Facebook will have clubhouses and all that other stuff that serve needs other than the needs of introverts to hide in their house in their pajamas and absorb entertainment in a pressure-free way. I think it's probably good for those things to exist. All that said, as an introvert, it's probably not for me. Like, even though I sit here and talk into a microphone all week, I'm not really raring to go when it comes to the idea of essentially having a real-time phone call with strangers. Just not into that. But it doesn't mean this is not A useful and necessary and potentially wildly popular idea, and B, going to be very successful, whether it's through Clubhouse or, someone else who takes this ball and runs with it.
So I've had a Clubhouse account for a couple of weeks, but I have never remembered to listen in on any of the chats at a time when it was convenient to do so. And so I'll be sitting there and think to myself as I'm like trying to watch a TV show, oh, I should listen to a Clubhouse. Well, I can't do that right now. I'm in the middle of watching a TV show. Or, oh, the kids are around. Don't want to do that. And so I haven't even done as much as Marco has, even though I've had my account for a couple of weeks. But my understanding of it, even though everything you guys said I think is accurate and I agree with, including that my take might be terrible, one of the things that I think is worth noting is my limited understanding is that you can have someone in the quote unquote audience come up and join the chat. So for example, if we were on Clubhouse right now and we found that somebody had a particularly interesting thing to say in the IRC chat room, well, if this was Clubhouse, we could say to that person in the chat room, we could like bless them with the ability to talk on our show. And I think that's a very interesting and novel idea, having never experienced it yet. And I like the idea that you can have a regular Joe Schmo and join in on a chat with a celebrity of any size, a celebrity the size of us, which is to say not really a celebrity at all, or an honest to goodness celebrity, and I think that that's super neat and novel because it is very much like, I forget which one of you guys said it, but very much like Twitter, where you're watching these celebrities, but even more so, you can talk to these celebrities. And with Twitter, you're talking via your keyboard. With Clubhouse, you're talking with your voice. And that, I think, is clever and novel and interesting. Whether or not it's my cup of tea, I don't know. Again, I haven't really properly tried it yet, but it doesn't strike me as the kind of thing I would like. But I definitely do want to give it an honest shake before I make up my mind.
It's a perfect opportunity for Merlin to do his pre-taped call-in gag from, was it from Mr. Show? Where, if you wanted to call in about the pets or the elderly, you should have called in last week. Because, anyway, it's a complicated joke for me to explain, and I can't do it. Sorry, everybody.
Give me the bullet points, John.
I can't even do the bullet points. But, yeah, it's like a call-in show. I mean, we've all seen call-in, AM talk radio is like that. Hello, caller, you're on the line. What do you have to say? And they're pre-screened and all this stuff. But now this is the disintermediated version where you're just plucked from the audience and allowed to talk. I thought it was even more of a free-for-all than that, and maybe it can be. But yeah, if you have people picking people to come in, and then then you get, it's just a new venue for people to say Baba Booey, I guess, right? Like, or worse, or much worse. Mm. Because once you bless them to talk, now they have the microphone and everyone can hear them, and yeah, chat roulette. Let's never forget. But anyway, I don't mean to say that it's not a good thing, and I definitely want to try it. Mostly the reason I want to try it is because I want my damn username. Do they have usernames?
Yes.
I probably don't. I probably already don't have my username. You should cut this part out of the show. Someone's going to go and steal my username because I don't have an invite.
Do you want me to give you one?
Yes, please do.
Well, that's the other thing. Very quickly, I have like 5 invites, please don't ask me, but I can't use them because the only way to use them is to let Clubhouse have access to slurp up all of your contacts. Like, I would absolutely send you an invite right now.
Nope. Sorry, John.
Yeah, exactly. So I would send you an invite right now, John, if it wasn't for the fact that the only way to do an invite is to bless contacts access to the app where they're going to slurp up all of your data and do probably something terrible with it.
You probably have a spare device that you can turn off contacts from iCloud and delete all your contacts and then send me the invite code, right?
Do I really like you that much?
I mean, don't you have spare devices hanging around? Don't you have things you test on?
Yes.
So easy just to log out of iCloud and turn off your contacts.
All right, so I have a quick hot take on that, actually. Why is the address book API still a thing?
Yeah.
My opinion is that Apple needs to deprecate and remove the contact access API, the address book API.
I strongly disagree.
But no, it should be like photos. Do you want this app to have access to one photo that you select, to all your contact? And there's so many ways to do the exact same features with no loss of functionality without actually giving the app access to your contacts. You know what I mean?
I don't want the ability for people with 1 or 2 taps to be able to share their entire address book, even with their permission, to some new app. Because here's why. The reason why this is kind of a special case is that when you grant access to your address book to some app, that app not only has access to your personal information, but to the personal information of potentially hundreds of other people who didn't consent to that. And so it's different. When you're sharing your photo library, you're sharing your information. You are choosing and saying, I'm going to share my information with this app. When you share your contact list, you're sharing a bunch of information from people who did not consent to that and can't consent to that.
It's basically the same thing, because when you share your photo library, you're sharing photos of people who may not have consented for you to share their photo with this company, but you have pictures of them. Like it's
it's a very different thing.
No, because it's not even contacts is actually better, because presumably someone gave you that contact info, whereas you took that picture of that person. They may not have consented to that photo, but they were in public, so they have no choice, and now their photo, you're giving it to somebody else. It's the same deal. Like implicitly, when someone gives you information, or when you get information through some means that is deemed acceptable, like taking a photo in public, that you can then, there's an understanding that you can then take that information and do something else with it that they don't control. That's the price of giving it to you. So if you give someone your contact information, you understand that they could share that contact information with whoever they want. Now, you can get mad at them about it, and you can say, I wish they wouldn't share it with these app vendors, and you could be mad at an API saying they didn't mean to share it, or they don't understand what it means to share it. But in the end, it's the same thing. Once you give the information to someone else, it's under their control. Who knows what could happen to it from there? And I feel like photos are very similar. You're thinking of like, someone's in the background of a picture. That's not a big deal. But what if it's like a photo of a personal nature, let's say? And that's why we have laws against, revenge porn and all sorts of stuff like that. But even if it's just an embarrassing picture of you looking goofy and you really wish that person hadn't uploaded it to something that put it online for everyone to see and find forever, I think in both cases, I'm with you that I think there should be much more control over what's shared, and it should be much harder to indiscriminately share. But I think that both situations are similar in that once you give information that you care about to somebody else, you are at their mercy somewhat. You're at the mercy of their decisions to some degree.
Yeah, but I think there's a huge difference in degree and in actionable uses between leaking of other people's data through photo access and through contact access. I mean, through photos, what are you going to do? Like upload 2 terabytes of photos to your service without somebody noticing? Like that's kind of a big deal. And then once you have those photos, what do you like? Are you going to analyze every single one of them to try to match faces? Whereas like a contact book, the entire contact book is uploaded within a few hundred kilobytes. Then you have all their data in seconds, and then every single bit of that data is instantly cross-referenceable to get emails, phone numbers from all these people. And so the degree of leaking other people's personal data and the ease with which it is leaked through the address book API is so much higher and easier for bad actors to use. You can instantly spam them because now you know how to contact them. So you can instantly spam these people. You can send emails. You can send text messages. You can cross-reference those phone numbers with other databases and everything. It's such a different degree that Apple should not be in the business of enabling apps to have massive instant privacy violations for everybody in a way that the user might not be considering or might not even be thinking about, maybe there's somebody in my contact list who just got a new phone number for some good reason, and they don't want all these services or other people to know it. There's so many bad abuse cases where the address book, mass data dumps to a service can be instantly used wrong and instantly have negative effects. Whereas picking a few photos for an app to see is a very, very different context. And I don't think there's enough positive uses of the entire contact list API to make up for this massive negative downside that's not only possible, but that's probably much more frequently used than any positive use case.
I mean, you can also give access to all your photos. And I feel like the protection of data volume for photos is kind of like the protection of data volume for movies. Like in the beginning of piracy, it was difficult to even pass around MP3s. And the idea that we would be passing around, pirated movies to each other was ridiculous, because who can put an entire movie? You don't even have a room for that on your hard drive. It's just a matter of time before that stuff becomes tractable as well. And I feel like it's the same deal. Yes, contacts is obviously the best case because it's a low volume of data, because people don't have 100,000 contacts, and it's text, so it's real easy, even if you set aside the contact images, right?
It's also precise. A phone number and an email address are precise. They specifically identify somebody with very high certainty.
But I mean, the photos have the potentially location information, and I feel like the thing that is currently protecting photos and videos from the same problems that you're describing is the volume of the data and the precision that we are able to extract from photos. But imagine a future where it is extremely easy and there are giant databases to cross-reference locations and faces and people, where you can just go to a website of some terrible company that has aggregated all this information because they made some cool, fun thing that everyone needs to use, that you give permission to access all your stuff, and say, show me all the pictures of this person when they were on vacation at Disney World, and it can aggregate photos and do a 3D render of a fly-through of you walking around the Disney park collected from thousands of people's phones who took pictures with you in the background. That sounds ridiculous now, but it's like, oh, think of the data that would take and the computation, and it's going to be on a freaking web page in 20 years, right? So I get, the future is the future, and we're talking about the present, and yes, contacts should definitely be locked down, and it's the worst case scenario right now, but I think photos and videos are just as bad, if not worse, and we're just protected from them essentially by being down in the slowness, to use a reference from a cool science fiction novel I read once, and that sometime within our lifetime, photos and videos will fall to the same thing that contacts do now. And especially if we forbid contacts but still allow access to all photos with one tap, that's where they'll go next, just because who knows what you can extract. How many people have ever taken a picture of their driver's license or an ID card to upload to something that requires identification in a website and left that picture in their camera roll and forgot about it? You may not be able to find it, but the computers can, right? So, this is a grim warning from the future of even cheaper computation. We should protect our photos and videos too.
Well, on an infinite time scale, you're right. But today, address book access is instantly way more problematic than photo access.
20 years, not infinite time scale. I'm putting a cap on this one.
All right, so as someone who has actually worked heavily with the Contacts API, may I have a chance, please? I think I see both of you, to be honest. I think for me, the rightest answer is the same style of API where you get different levels of access, such that one could bless an app to have the ability to slurp up all their contacts. However, I definitely see Marco's point, and I think the thing that strikes me about contacts in particular is that, to my eyes today, it's more actionable. And I think one of you said precise a second ago, but it's more actionable. Like when I have a photograph of Marco that's been uploaded, yeah, I guess if it was a weird photo of Marco, like a computer could maybe figure out that it was an uncomfortable photo of Marco and like do something with it maybe. But when I upload Marco's phone number, somebody could call him right then and interrupt his day right then. And so it is far more actionable data than I think a photograph is, at least today.
Well, you can do associations with photos. Here's Marco with the founder of the Proud Boys. Not an actual thing that happened.
Sure.
No problem. We could do that today with machine learning and start doing graphs of associations, especially you have dates and locations to say this person ate dinner with this person at this time in this location. That's current technology. And I feel like that is probably more damning than, realistically speaking, someone's cell phone number or their email address, which honestly is pretty easy to get via other means. And it's not like most people in their contacts have everyone's mailing address listed. So contacts are bad, but I think photos, I feel like you just need a little bit of imagination to understand exactly how bad that can be, because it's not like they're going to look for the embarrassing picture of you. They're going to do the same crap they do with contact information, which is make graphs of associations and times and places, put you into demographics, guess your age and your gender, figure out if you're about to have a baby, like all the things that they can do based on all your other activity. Photos is a treasure trove of that crap. And if you lock down contacts or make it more difficult to retrieve, or everyone uses sign in with Apple and doesn't give people their email addresses, photos is a goldmine.
I agree with you, but I still think contacts are far more problematic in today's world. But all of that said, I once wrote an app that slurped up all your contacts and did something I like to think novel and interesting with them. And I would hate for there to be a scenario wherein a user couldn't use my app because there was no API for it. Now, maybe that's the cost of doing business, but I think it's a very tough pickle for Apple to be in, where they don't necessarily want to kill the vignettes of the world, because I did that already. They don't want to kill the vignettes of the world or whatever the case may be, but they also don't want to make it easy for the Clubhouses of the world, and maybe I'm unfairly besmirching them, but the Clubhouses of the world to do something nefarious with your contacts. So what is the happy medium? well, I guess you trust the user, which is what John was saying, what I think I agree with. But
well, no, what I was saying is you could make an API that lets you do all the features that you care about. Forget about the vignettes, because honestly, vignette should be a feature that's built into the OS, like
Sure.
kind of like it is now.
It
where
was.
It goes out and, you know
well,
what I mean? Like,
ish, yeah.
not really, but like exactly what he did is like, well, you might have other pictures and other services, so the OS will go out and find them, right? That's really just something like another example of a third party makes a thing that Apple should really put in the OS, right? But everything else, like autocompletes or even sending to contacts, there is no reason that the app ever needs to see that data to accomplish those features, right? Like you can have an autocomplete in a widget that runs with XPC and another process that is essentially, as far as the app is concerned, a fancy way for you, the user, to autocomplete something, but the app only ever sees what you finish autocompleting and type into the text field. It has no idea like what was being fed into the autocomplete. That's an eminently makeable API, right? And same thing with like, oh, do you want to, send this thing out to a bunch of your friends? Here, pick a bunch of these friends from this list, and another UI comes up that the app does not control that runs in another process, lets you select contacts, and is mediated by an Apple service that hides all the email addresses. Like that functionality that is a quote unquote essential part of a smooth application experience can be done without giving applications access to any of your contact information. The address book API that Marco was talking about does not do that. And so that's why, yes, that API should be canned and replaced with a better one that never actually gives your app access to anything. Because in most cases, unlike photos where the app literally does need one photo, if it's like a photo editor or something, it needs at least one photo. You need to give the app the photo, otherwise it can't edit it. But you don't actually need to give the app the contact in many cases, especially given that Apple has this whole thing now where they make their own private email addresses with random names and connect it up to your own behind the scenes. So the plumbing's already there to essentially never give apps access to contacts.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I guess what I'm saying is it's an interesting tug of war that I think Apple would have to go through. Like what you're describing is somewhere between a moderate to massive engineering challenge, I'd reckon, but it's not unreasonable, especially for a company that's as big and as everywhere as Apple is. But here again, I keep coming down to, my initial take is, of course, let everyone have access to everything. And then you see the clubhouses and all the other gross things in the world. And then you come to Marco's point of view, what are the little balls, the Jacob's ladder, whatever it is, that bunk into each other. I forget what that thing is called. But anyways.
Jacob's ladder is the thing with the electric spark that goes up.
Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Sorry.
Newton's
you know what I'm
cradle.
talking about? The little desk.
Newton's cradle. Apparently.
Yes, thank you. Newton's cradle. Anyways, so, I start all the way on the right-hand side with, sure, why not give everyone access to all the contacts? What could go wrong? And then you see what goes wrong. And then, the ball falls and it bonks into other intermediate balls. And now I'm swinging the other way of, oh, you should only ever be allowed like anonymized contacts or whatever the case may be. But for Apple, I think you need to kind of ride that line. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do. And that's one of the things that I think I lose sight of when I criticize Apple a lot, is that it's a very different thing to have to be all things to all people. And it's a very different thing operating at the scale that they operate at, where a bug that hits 0.1% of all users, like, I don't know, my SMS bug, which, by the way, is mostly gone away for reasons I don't understand. For a bug that hits 1% of all users, that's still like 1 million, 100 million, 10 million users, however many ridiculous amounts of users it is. And so it's a hard thing because you don't know where the line really should be. But certainly if Apple's going to say we're the privacy company, then I would say they should err on the side of what Marco was saying, which is, no contacts access at all.
Plus, address book is like a C++ API, isn't it? So they should just can it for that reason.
Well, it's gotten better, but it's not good.
To be clear, I'm not saying that there's no legitimate use of this API. I'm not saying that certain things wouldn't get worse without this API. What I do think, though, is that this API, the benefits that it brings are substantially less than the privacy damage it does, especially because of its nature of such easily exploitable in mass data on not only the person who's saying, allow contacts, but on every single person they know that whose data they are giving away without those people's permission. That to me is it's really messy and not good, and that seems to be I think a good way to look at it is if Apple were designing this product today, this whole OS, this whole platform from scratch today, would they offer that access to anybody? Of course not. Because today's privacy conscious Apple in today's data leaky, horrible tracking analytics world, would they do this if starting fresh today? Almost certainly not. And so I think that's a good reason, ignore the sunk cost here. That's a pretty good reason to say that we probably shouldn't have this API today.
Yeah, for sure. They wouldn't do it today. And like as an example of, going back far enough, Unix was like that in the beginning, created in a, hippy-dippy environment where we're all just computer users here and we all trust each other and everything is open for the most part, even though Unix had a permission system and everything. Even when I first arrived at college and got on my first Unix system in the early 90s, it was basically a free-for-all. Like there was no SSH, Telnet, FTP, plain text passwords everywhere, world writable TTYs, and you would think, oh, well, that's the internet age. Everyone was savvy then and knew about bad things that could happen. No, they didn't know. We had to teach them by being terrible people on that Unix system. By the time I left that school, I've told the story before, they had locked down, world writable TTYs were no longer a thing, and SSH was starting to, come into being, and Telnet and FTP with plain text communications and passwords were out of fashion because too many people were hacked, and being able to get the ciphertext from the password file was also out of favor, and there were alternatives to that. And, that's the way things go. And so, the iPhone was made in 2007. At that point, like stuff that like what Path did, do you remember Path, the company that like took all your contacts and uploaded it to a server?
Yeah.
Apple made that API, and they were still in the hippy-dippy Unix mindset of like, well, we're making a platform and it's super secure and it's sandboxed, and boy, isn't this iPhone security amazing? But like, they still didn't have a full grasp of the bad actors, right? It's just, people can do incredibly novel. It's like, no one's ever going to like, what good would it do to secretly take all your contacts and upload it? What value is there in having everybody's contacts all together? Because having millions and millions of contacts, like, that's not useful. It's just too much data. And it turns out that actually is very useful to advertising companies, and Apple didn't foresee that. So they made an API that seemed like a good idea at the time, despite the fact that this API was on a system that they were like locking down with the tightest security they could imagine, with all, the applications can't do whatever they want and no private APIs and everything's sandboxed and everything is encrypted. They were doing all that, but at the same time, they didn't understand that, oh yeah, there's actually value in just en masse extracting everybody's contacts and jamming them up to a server, at which point they become a giant bucket of, slop for the ad industry. So, yeah, live and learn.
I have some follow-up about my question last week about where we would live if not the East Coast. But to ease into that and to kind of get us in the right mood, Marco, if you had to live in another country, where would you live?
Oh, that's a good question.
And I'll accept a top 2 or 3 if you need, whatever the case may be.
Do I instantly magically know the language of another country, or do I have to stick with what I know now?
No, that's cheating.
I like the spirit of your question, but I concur with John. For the purposes of what I'm driving at, let's say no, you do not know the language.
I mean, you can learn it if you want, but you don't instantly magically get to know it.
Right. Okay. So that's gonna restrict me, not because I refuse to learn anything new, but because I'm extremely self-conscious about that, and so I would not want to live somewhere where I don't already know the language. So that will limit it to either English speaking or at least like commonly English familiar countries, like Germany. When I've traveled to Germany, which I've liked a lot, and actually might be my answer here. So many people there know English that it wasn't a big problem for me to not know much, if any, German. I could plausibly live there and get by okay while I learn the language a little bit better. So like that's an option. But ultimately, I would probably end up picking the UK. Is that a country? Wait, England? One of those.
I think there's a video on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a video on that.
Yeah, because I have really enjoyed what I've seen of the UK, both London and even other cities as well. I've enjoyed that a lot. So probably either Germany or England.
John?
So this is a tricky because I never go anywhere. The only other countries I've ever been to are the UK and Canada. That's not much to choose from based on personal experience, and both of those places I've only been to briefly. The reason I'm hesitant to pick the UK is not because I don't like it, because I've spent a total of about a little over 2 weeks in the UK, and I thought it was great and I loved it. But of all the English speaking countries in the world, theirs seem to have a government that is the second worst screwed up, second to us, and that would be depressing to me, to leave like the most screwed up English speaking government in the world, being the US, for the second most. And it's like, oh, come on, there's so many better choices. You got to go to the second worst. Like it's all the same problems, but like with a different accent and on a smaller scale. And that would really depress me. So I end up leaning towards places that I've never been, but just seen pictures of. And the thing that comes to mind immediately, and maybe this would be a terrible mistake, I don't know because I've never actually been there, but New Zealand.
Yeah, I thought about that.
It's beautiful. The people are sane. It really looks like it's probably a nice place. I don't know. Maybe I'd go stir crazy on a little island. Maybe I wouldn't like the culture or something. But boy, in pictures, it looks really good. And their government is not screwed up. And they speak English-ish.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of asterisks on that, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did go there, and I love New Zealand. It is a bit far from North America in ways that I think would irritate me. And I found that the internet connection situation in New Zealand, and from what I hear, I believe this applies to Australia as well, is generally not. It's harder to get really good fast internet connections there. That could be outdated information. I'm sorry, because for everybody who lives there, because otherwise, I think both Australia and New Zealand seem to be significantly better run as countries than what we have here.
Australia's got a little bit of a screwed up government, and it's mostly a giant desert, so I'm a little bit wary of that. I've seen too many Mad Max movies.
But it also doesn't have bad winters, so that's a feature for me.
And I don't want to give Canada short shrift. It's just, I know Canada, you're going to feel, it's the cold. I'm sorry. You're actually pretty far north. I don't think I could do that. Sorry.
Yeah, Canada is beautiful in the summer. I cannot do more severe winters than what I have now.
Yeah, for me, I think if I were really and truly being honest with myself, if I really and truly had to leave America, I would go to Canada, despite the fact that the thought of a Canadian winter just chills me to the bone, and much less actually being in a Canadian winter. But that being said, in this fantasy world where I think I could handle, moving that far away from everyone I knew, I think the UK would be a very strong contender. I think if I could convince myself that I could learn the language, I would strongly consider Germany as well. We traveled there together, Marco. Oh, you went one other time before, though, didn't you? Okay.
Yeah.
So my only experience with Germany is when we all went, and as we've said many, many times on the show, I freaking loved it. And I went into it thinking, well, I'm sure it'll be fine. I've been to Europe a few times before, and I've always liked it, and it'll be okay. And I loved it. I was very surprised with how much I enjoyed it. And so I like to think that I would give Germany a shot. Every American I've ever met that has spent any time in Australia swears that they would move there if they were given the opportunity. And I think that the same is probably true of New Zealand. But I don't think, Marco, you said this a second ago, I don't think I could stand being that physically far away from everyone that I knew. I mean, not in a literal sense, of course, that's hyperbole. But, I don't think I could handle being that far away from like my family, my extended family and so many of my friends and so on. So I think realistically, Canada would probably be my first choice because of proximity. And in a fantasy world where I could do whatever, I would probably try for Germany and realistically end up in the UK. Now that brings us into our follow-up. Many people were perturbed of varying degrees, sometimes amusingly perturbed and sometimes genuinely perturbed, that we forgot about the Midwest and the Great Lakes.
We didn't forget.
No, we didn't forget. You guys,
I'm from the Midwest.
Yeah, you all forget that they have awful winters there. Oh, no, I'm absolutely not doing that. I know that the summers are gorgeous. I've lived in the Midwest. I know it. But winter? Hell no. Absolutely not. Not even possible. No.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, growing up in Ohio and then going to college in Pennsylvania, I am done with winters there. that was enough. The winters are way colder, way icier. In the case of northwestern Pennsylvania, way snowier because it's near the Great Lakes and that whole thing. And then also the summers are also hotter. The further inland you are, you typically don't have the tempering effect of being closer to the ocean. So it's significantly less temperate. So you have much bigger extremes of, you have way colder winters, way hotter summers. I've lived that for a long time. If I'm picking places to go, I'm going to try to make an improvement on that area, not make things worse.
Yeah. And I think it does fit the bill in a lot of ways if you can live the snowbird life. The Great Lakes are enormous. They do have plenty of beaches. In some ways, you could almost argue that the Great Lakes are an improvement over the ocean because, they're not saltwater and there's fewer waves if you have small children, for example.
This makes them worse. We've discussed the mud beach, Casey.
I know. I'm just saying you could make an argument, but those winners, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So thank you, all of you from the Midwest. We hear you. We love you, but no. Moving on. Last week, we discussed, I believe in Ask ATP, some precious media that we all have. And I got a couple of people emailing me saying, in nice ways, stop being a loser and just upload that concert for Charlottesville. And eventually I listened. And so as I sit here tonight on the evening of February 17th, the concert for Charlottesville that I spoke about many times in the past, I have uploaded it to archive.org, and it is still there as of right now. It is, I believe, 13 gigs. It is a 10-hour show. I think I said 6 last week, but it's actually a 10-hour video. And I believe that all of the chapters I put in to mark each individual artist performance did survive the upload and then a re-download from other people on the internet. So if you would like to check out this concert, which I really think is a really special thing, I strongly recommend it. I will say that if you try to just stream it from archive.org, it does not seem to work in my experience. You have to download all 13 gigs. And they seem to be throttling it to about a megabyte a second, so it'll take a while. But it is very good, and if you're interested, it is up. And I wrote a small blog post about it, which we will link in the show notes.
I've just been ignoring this Charlottesville thing because I just assumed that there are no bands that I have heard of or care about in it. But is that actually the case, Casey? Is this the type of thing that I should watch? Tell me something that played there that I would be interested in.
I think that's quite possible. It was opened with, there was a small Dave Matthews by himself performance, but it's Cage the Elephant, who I'd never heard of, and I found to be okay. It was, two guys from Coldplay, the singer-pianist whose name is Chris Martin, and Johnny Greenwood is the guitarist. I hope I have that right. It doesn't matter if I don't. It's the guitarist and the singer from Coldplay, just the two of them. Their performance was good, and there were some really funny, honest moments in that where Chris Martin says, I want to try, I think it was a Beatles song, or maybe it's not, I forget who it was, but I want to try this cover. Please don't put it on YouTube if it sucks, because I don't want to be embarrassed about it, but for the rest of my life. So that I think is worth it. The best performance possibly of the entire show, I think, was The Roots, which are not a band that I typically like, but they did a lot of like old school soul covers, which I thought was really, really good. Oh, I'm being told real-time follow-up. Johnny Greenwood is Radiohead, my bad. So anyways, The Roots, and then Pharrell comes out with The Roots, and that was very good. Chris Stapleton, who is a country singer who I can tell is very good, but it's not really my cup of tea. Ariana Grande did a solo set. Like, she was the only person on stage against like a backing tape, if you will. And her performance was actually very good. Another great one was Justin Timberlake, who I know is really problematic right now, but if you can accept just his performance and not anything else about him, his set was extremely good. And then Marco's favorite band in the entire world, the Dave Matthews Band, closes it out, including a guest appearance from Stevie Wonder, which is pretty cool. Then, like I said, the whole thing is something like 10 hours. And I think it's worth at least listening to his background music. You don't necessarily need to watch it, but it's a really, really cool thing. And they have some like interludes in the in-between sections talking about, what makes Charlottesville special, what makes this event so terrible. Well, not the concert, but the things leading up to the concert so terrible. I don't know. I really think it's worth watching or listening to at least once. But if none of those artists mean anything to you, then no, don't bother.
We are sponsored this week by Linode, my favorite place to run all of my servers. Whether you're working on a personal project or managing an entire enterprise's infrastructure, you deserve simple, affordable, and accessible cloud computing solutions that allow you to take your project to the next level. Simplify your cloud infrastructure with Linode's Linux virtual machines and develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and easier. I personally have been using Linode for about 8 years, something like that, way before they were a sponsor of any of my stuff, because I really love Linode. They're just a great web host. I've tried a lot of web hosts over the years, believe me, a lot. And most of them, mediocre. I stayed with them maybe 6 months or a year, and then I moved on to something better. Linode is so great. I've stuck with them this entire time. The whole time, they've been the best value I've seen in the business. They have amazing performance. They have amazing versatility, amazing support if you need it. Their control panel and API are all fantastic, so you can really, support all your various needs very well. They have specialty things covered, things like their new S3 compatible object storage, managed Kubernetes support, different resource levels and stuff like that, GPU compute plans, all sorts of great stuff available at Linode. You can get started today with $100 in free credit at linode.com/ATP, or text ATP to 474747 to get instant access to that $100 in free credit. Once again, linode.com/ATP, or text ATP to 474747 for that $100 in free credit. And you can spend that on their awesome dedicated compute instances, their Linode virtual machines, their S3 compatible object storage, all sorts of great stuff at Linode. Once again, linode.com/ATP, create that free account to get started, or text ATP to 474747. Get started today. Thank you to Linode for hosting all my servers and sponsoring our show.
We have from Richard Harris some more information about watch timers. Another obvious thing missing in Apple Watch timers: why are timers set on my watch not synced with my phone, and vice versa? If I start a timer on my phone, I see the countdown on my phone lock screen, but nothing appears on my Apple Watch, not even when you go and open the Watch Timer app. And if I start a timer on my watch, there's no corresponding countdown shown on my phone. Note that once the timer is set on my phone ends, the alert appears on both the phone and the watch, even though the countdown did not. This is a really good point. However, I will say that I actually like this behavior because oftentimes I want a silent timer, and in my experience, maybe I have this wrong, but I believe if you set a timer on your phone, it's going to beep, even if you're in silent mode or vibrate mode or whatever. But if you set it on your watch, and if your watch is in tap 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 mode, it will just tap 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 you, and that's that. So I understand Richard's point, but I actually kind of like it the way it is. But maybe I'm bananas. Marco, what do you think about this?
I mean, it's a really tricky thing. Like, you could argue that should things like timers sync across more? Like, what about HomePod versus phone? Like, should those sync? There's certainly utility to that. Like, if HomePod, watch, and phone all sync their timers, then you could set a timer by shouting into the air. No matter what device picked it up, you would have it displayed on all of them, and they would, all alert you when it was over or something. I'm not sure, but that's the problem. Like, when you start figuring, like, okay, what should the behavior be defined as in cases X, Y, and Z? It starts getting a little bit messy. Like, like the silent switch, should that be activated or not? If it goes off on the HomePod, or if you summon it on the HomePod, then should it go off on the HomePod every time? Or, what if the HomePod's in the next room and now you're in a different room? Should it go off then, or should it only ring your phone? What if you expected it to ring on the HomePod and your phone is actually sitting on the counter somewhere and not in your pocket or not in your hand, and then it buzzes just the phone, then you miss it? Like, there's all sorts of weird cases that, like, once you start syncing stuff and having it try to show up everywhere, you start running into these kind of like, messy areas of how the behavior should be. And so it would be nice if there was more like unification like that in many cases, but not in all cases.
I think this is an obvious thing. I agree with Richard that this is obvious and this should absolutely be a feature. But just because you have global awareness of a thing and it's synchronized doesn't mean that you have to surface that. So assuming that Apple could get the sync right, which is not a given, based on how difficult it's been for them to sync, like, keyboard completions or whatever, autocomplete things and other tiny pieces of data that should be trivial to sync. There should be global awareness of timers, right? And the default behavior should probably be like it is now, which is everybody in the house that's signed into your Apple ID knows about the timers, but they don't do anything about them. Just the device you did it on does something about them, right? And then if you have desires, like, like Richard, like, what I would actually like whenever I set a timer on my phone and watch for them to show each other or whatever, you can opt into that, because global awareness of the timer is kind of like having multiple timers. Like, how hard a feature is that? Just have multiple timers in the air, or whatever. It's like, oh, it's too complicated or whatever. Just allow that to exist and allow there to be global awareness and allow people to opt in. Even if it's like, hey, you're in the room with the HomePod. The HomePod knows about your timer. It's not going to ring you because you set it on your phone, right? But you could ask the HomePod, hey, how's that, what do you call it, potato timer doing? And the HomePod won't be like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, potato timer. It'll be like, oh, I know about that because behind the scenes, we've all been talking to each other and synchronizing through iCloud because it's just a timer and it's really easy to sync. It's got like a string and like the start time and it's like, it's not a lot of data. That's exactly what you're looking for from the Apple ecosystem. Global awareness, not necessarily global cacophony of like alarms going off or whatever. So I think starting from a baseline of trivial data should be synced everywhere, and do not leap from that to, it should automatically display everywhere, automatically go off anywhere. And don't even try to do like, proximity, like, because Apple has all these proximity APIs where it tries to figure out what you're near to. Don't even try to do that if you can't nail it. Just by default, you set the timer on your phone, it goes off on your phone. But if you happen to be somewhere else, you can ask the HomePod to do it. And if you really want it to always show up on your watch, you can ask it. Just like now, like the whole reason that Richard said that this shows up on the alert shows up is because there is a single option that says, hey, do you want me to your phone to mirror the alerts, your watch to mirror the alerts on your phone or not? And that's it. That's the only option. And it's the same type of thing could be with like timers. Hey, do you want your watch to mirror the timers on your phone or not? And that would be like opting into, I just always wanted to display in both cases. That alone would be a big upgrade, being able to ask any Apple device and being able to opt into phone and watch synchronization, because that makes sense because they're both sort of like personal devices that you probably have on or near you, as opposed to HomePods and who knows what else, which could be anywhere. So I like this idea. Apple should do it. I really wish Apple could. I really wish we had faith to say that this task of synchronizing tiny pieces of trivial ephemeral information that we don't even care about, it can just go away after it's done. I wish it was just a given that Apple would be able to instantly sync that everywhere. But unfortunately, we can't. We can't just assume that based on how well Apple has done with syncing trivial things in the past.
All right, Chris Harper writes in with some more information on MDM, which is mobile device management. This comes out of Ask ATP last week about would you let your personal life seep into your corporate devices. Chris writes, I manage about 350 Apple devices using Jamf Pro, who I believe we're a past sponsor. Most of these are iPads, but some are iPhones, and there are a few iPod Touches in the mix. What I've learned since we started device management in 2015 is that all the mobile device management platforms have pretty much the same capabilities on Apple devices. These platforms all operate differently, but the commands they are sending to the devices are all the same. They are limited by what Apple allows. There's a good support article from Apple, which we'll link in the show notes, that explains Apple MDM in detail, as well as the differences between what is available for restrictions policies for supervised and non-supervised devices. So quick aside from me, from Apple, they're quoting Apple, supervision generally denotes that the device is owned by the organization, which provides additional control over its configuration and restrictions. So now back to Chris. I was going to make a long list of things that you can and can't do with MDM, but then I found this helpful PDF, linked in the show notes, that explains it well. In particular, take a look at page 10. So let me read from that PDF. MDM can see device name, phone number, serial number, model name and number, capacity and space available, iOS version number, and installed apps. MDM cannot see personal data such as personal or work email, calendars, contacts, SMS or iMessages, Safari browser history, which is something that I did not know. I assumed it could, FaceTime or phone call logs, personal reminders and notes, frequency of app use, and device location. So back to Chris. Basically, the IT MDM admin can see some basic info about the device itself, but nothing that is really personal. And more appropriately, they can't really see anything that they don't already have access to in other ways. Things like the content in email, Teams, your file server, Slack, etc., those all exist in other server environments with their own ways of monitoring employees for whatever reasons they may have. So that's a bunch of words that to say that it's not as scary as I had thought even. And I assumed it wasn't quite as bad as I thought, but it's actually considerably less scary than I thought. And Apple really doesn't let your employer see that much. That being said, your employer can still read all the emails sent via your employment email address. They can read all your, Slack messages and so on. So it doesn't mean you're out of the woodwork, but it's not as bad as I thought.
Is that list of see and can't see stuff from the supervised device or the non-supervised one?
That's a good question. I don't know, to be honest with you. I just clipped it out of the PDF and put it in the show notes. We'd have to look back in that PDF, but that's a very fair question.
And I have to say, the other reason that I don't think we touched on about MDM on devices and why I was wary of it is kind of the same reason that I moan and complain about stuff on my laptops. Setting aside the privacy stuff, that software sometimes affects both the performance and the sort of reliability of the thing that's running on. Certainly in the case of the Mac, where it's obviously a much more of a free-for-all situation than on a phone. But I've always imagined that some kind of MDM stuff happening on my phone could also cause problems that otherwise wouldn't happen. Right or wrong, because I've never actually had a phone enrolled in MDM, but just the idea of, work, running software, installing stuff, doing whatever it is to do, sending commands to my phone when I don't know they're doing it, they could potentially do things that, slow down or screw up my phone. Just doesn't seem appealing to me.
Jonathan Dietz writes in with some information on SSD wear and RAM. Can you tell us about this, John?
This was a point we didn't bring up when we were fretting about whether the SSD usage on M1 Max was going to wear them out prematurely. Jonathan says, NAND flash memory endurance is based on the finite number of program/erase, or PE cycles, of the individual memory cells. Given equal workloads, an SSD with twice the capacity having twice the number of cells will last twice as long. Unless the additional page outs from having only 8 gigs of RAM rather than 16 gigs of RAM result in more than doubling your total lifetime writes to the SSD, there's no way that spending $200 on 60 gigs of RAM instead of the 512 gigabyte storage option will be better for extending the lifespan of your SSD. So this is obvious but worth saying. If you have the same amount of RAM, right? If the use is this, or not RAM, the same amount of stuff that you're storing, but you get an SSD that's twice as big, you've got more sort of green field that hasn't been worn out by your activity. Like the more cells you have to wear out, and if you use them the same amount, which is the real tricky part about this assumption, then yeah, it will last twice as long. Now, in reality, it's kind of like getting a bigger house. If you get a bigger SSD, you're going to fill it with stuff. Like no one gets a bigger SSD and says, wow, I've got all this free space. Now my SSD will last longer. No, you fill it with stuff. So I think realistically, I'm not sure how much this saves people because it's inevitable that you will put stuff in it. But in general, more SSD to wear out is better, right? Now on this thread, on Twitter, there's been ongoing threads of people posting their numbers from the Smart Tools thing about their data being written. And I don't, it keeps going on and people still keep getting staggered by the numbers. When we did comparisons last week, Casey and I were in the same ballpark and it didn't seem that ridiculous to me. But some numbers that these people are putting up seem a little bit ridiculous. And I don't know, is this like a very, because people use their computers for different things. Is this a very strange scenario? Is there something going on with their particular computer? Is there a bug in the tools that is reporting incorrect numbers? I don't know, but I pulled out one. We'll link to the tweet. This is from David. He's got a 16 gig M1 MacBook Pro, which, by the way, most of these are 16 gigs because there's a bunch of computer nerds and they all bought the one with more RAM. So I think the only thing we can conclusively say is that 8 versus 16 gigs of RAM is not a factor because almost all these ridiculous numbers are from people with 16 gigs of RAM. Like it's not the swap that's doing this. Or if it is, it means these people need way more than 16 gigs of RAM and they can't get it because that's all the M1s come with. But anyway, power on hours, 432. That's a small number of hours. Very small, right? Data units written, 150 terabytes.
Oy.
Wow.
So if we do the math on that, that's 347 gigabytes per hour written.
That doesn't seem right.
That seems much bigger than the numbers that Casey and I had. Weren't we like 200 to 300 gigs per like day or month or something?
I already forgot.
I know. Anyway, I don't remember our exact numbers referred to last week's show, but I keep in this thread of people just posting their numbers. This was the one that I was like, okay, this seems like it might be a problem because 350 gigs per hour, something's going on here. So it's trivially easy to do that amount of I/O. Just get something that just constantly writes big files. Use DD in a for loop. Like you can absolutely do this. Like there's no problem doing this. The question is like, are these people using their computers in a normal way? And this is some kind of systemic problem. I don't understand how it could be. Like, what is it? What are they? This is one of those sort of vague, slow motion computer panics where people are like, something is going on, but no one will ever say, okay, what's going on? Computers are knowable. This is the thing we should be able to know. You can't just say, but something's going on with these M1s. They're wearing out those SSDs. Are they? How are they wearing out those SSDs? It's not the type of thing you can't just leave it there and say, they're wearing out their SSDs. Look at these numbers. Okay, what's doing that? Run FS usage, figure it out, So I don't know what the problem is, and it's frustratingly vague, and I don't like vague technical problems, but all I know is if you want to follow us on Twitter, feel free to look at this thread and watch people slowly, vaguely panic about high numbers without ever actually figuring out what the problem is.
Oh man! All right. Last week we talked about more safe programming. I think this was with relation to like the Apple Car that may or may not ever happen.
And Tesla's crazy ambitions that might not match their
yes.
quality levels of software.
Indeed. And so I brought up Ada, which was a programming language that I had thought was used kind of a lot in the defense industry. And an anonymous person wrote in to say, well, yes, or actually several anonymous people wrote in. Several of them said, yes, Ada is a thing in the defense industry. Then a different anonymous person said that most of this kind of development is actually now done using MISRA-C, where MISRA is an acronym, of course, which is Motor Industry Software Reliability Association. And pulling from Wikipedia, apparently MISRA-C's aim is to facilitate code safety, security, portability, and reliability in the context of embedded systems, which is about what a car is, or wants to be. A car would like safe code that's secure and portable and reliable, and it's going to be run on an embedded system. So, yep, checks out.
I got to make my joke about this now. So MISRA-C is like C, but with limitations. There's a bunch of stuff that you aren't allowed to do because they're unsafe, so on and so forth. And so it is, it has fewer features than C. Like, for example, I think you can't do function pointers or whatever. Like, it's more provably correct. It's easier to understand. And so I can imagine if you're a C program working in it, it will make you miserable not to be able to use all those features.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
It's right there. MISRA-C. Who's naming their thing MISRA? Don't name your thing MISRA-C when it's going to make C programmers miserable. It's right there.
Dad jokes.
Wow.
All right. As punishment for that dad joke, we all now have to live through even more of this stupid T56-8A versus T56-8B. Your dad joke is now getting all of us punished. So I'm not even helping you on this. This is all you, John.
Yeah, no. Last week we had a follow-up item that was cut from the show because it turned out to be follow-up for another one of my podcasts. But it paired well with this one because it was about it was about like urban myths or sort of anecdotal stories that people make a leap from a personal experience to a generalized theory, right? That is definitely the case in our past discussions of T568A versus B, where various people think there's a super important difference because they did this one thing one time and they changed from A to B and that made all the difference. Therefore, B is better than A or A is better than B or whatever the case may be, right?
And for context, these are the two different ways you can wire Ethernet jacks or wires with which color pair you split between the terminals where you split the pair.
Right. And we were misled by articles that said that they were different, but then everyone said, no, they're electrically identical. The only difference is the colors of the insulation and electrons can't see colors. So they're electrically identical, right? And yet people will continue to insist, hey, I did a thing and one time when we changed to B and it made everything better, therefore B is better, right? And I always ask these people, okay, but like, what's the mechanism? Like, why is it better? There should be a reason, not just, hey, we did a thing and it was better, therefore B is better, right? And John B. wrote in with at least a theory, a hypothesis that could be tested, right? And the hypothesis, based on fact, right? So here's John B. I've learned the hard way. Oh, anecdote, it begins. The pairs are in fact different. The number of twists per inch is different for different pairs, and that's why the B style is commonly used for high-speed links. It puts the pairs with more twists in the right place. Now, I tried to look this up and say, is that true? That each pair of wires has different number of twists, and as far as I can tell, yes, that actually is true. Just a part of Ethernet, like I mentioned, the twisted pairs are two pairs of cables that are twisted around each other, and they vary the number of twists per inch. So one pair is twisted like 2 twists every inch, and the other one is 2 twists every 5 inches or whatever, because varying the number of twists minimizes crosstalk or something. This seems like a type of thing that would be trivial to confirm by just simply cutting open an Ethernet wire and looking at the twists and saying, are any of them twisted more tightly together than other pairs? But I just did internet searching and it seemed like I could confirm that yes, this is true. But the real question is, okay, they're twisted different amounts to avoid crosstalk. This last bit, it puts the pairs with more twists in the right place. What does that mean? Is more twists better than fewer twists? What is the right place? There's no further analysis of this. Are they twisted different amounts? Is one pair always, is like the green and white one always twisted more than the red and white one? Or is it just arbitrary? I don't know. But here's the story. Here's John B's story, because we got to include the story. I was once called to a castle, yes, really, he says, for an Ethernet network that couldn't get out of its own way. One contract did the patch panel in Type B, and one did the wall plates in Type A. Amazingly, the NICs managed to figure it out, but it was slow as anything. So for the fun of it, we fixed half the castle to Type A and half to Type B. The B's were faster. We redid the A's to B, and they got us fast. It's real. So there's your castle-based anecdote. We changed to B, and it fixed everything. I don't doubt that happened. Okay, that happened. And then the reasoning behind it, it puts the pairs with more twists in the right place. I'm still going with they're electrically identical, but at least John B came up with a hypothesis as to what might be causing a difference, because apparently there is a physical difference in number of twists for each of the pairs.
I love that this story is continuing. That we've been talking about this for 5 episodes.
It seems like a thing that's knowable. Like, obviously, none of us care enough about it to cut open one of our Ethernet cables or to do any kind of testing. But it just seems like the type of thing that, look, I think probably if it is real, it is so minor that no one cares about it. Because if people cared about it, like someone with actual, equipment would like test it, like an electrical engineer would go through and test it, and just the answer would be on the internet. But apparently, if there is any difference, it's so small that no one even cares enough to test it, so it's left entirely to the realm of people with stories about castles.
Yeah, that's why I would expect, if this were true, that it had to be this certain way because of these reasons, that these would be so well documented, because Ethernet is so widespread and so well known and so old that you would think that this would be documented like crazy. And it just seems like no one has any it's all based on myths and hearsay, which is ridiculous for something that should be eminently knowable. We are sponsored this week by Mack Weldon, one of my favorite clothing brands. I wear Mack Weldon's clothes every single day. After taking a brief hiatus from outdoor activities and workout routines, it's time to get back to the grind with the new spring essentials from Mack Weldon. With body mapping technology and fabric mesh zones, Mack Weldon's new Stealth boxer briefs deliver enhanced breathability and support, perfect for everyday wear or to be layered underneath workout gear. And for sweatpants you can wear outside without feeling like you're wearing sweatpants, check out Mack Weldon's new Ace line. I actually did this literally today. I am wearing Mack Weldon's Ace sweatpants, and I did indeed wear them outside earlier when running lots of errands. These are fantastic. And I'm also wearing Mack Weldon's underwear, which I wear literally every single day. I have been for years. I'm currently wearing a Mack Weldon t-shirt, and I worked out in all this stuff earlier today. It's a wonderful clothing brand. They have everything you can imagine for, basic essentials: socks, shirts, hoodies, underwear, polos, active shorts. All of them are comfortable, and they all fit consistently. Their fabric is incredibly high quality, and they're versatile. They look great, they feel great, so you can work out in them, you can go out in them, you can go to work in them. Mack Weldon is for everyday life. These fabrics are customized by them. They can keep up with you no matter what your day looks like, and they guarantee their products. They want you to be comfortable. So if you don't like your first pair of Mack Weldon underwear, you can keep them, and they will still refund you, no questions asked. All of this is backed by Weldon Blue, their totally free loyalty program. Level 1 gets you free shipping for life. Once you hit $200 of spending, you get level 2, and that gets you 20% off every order for the next year. So for 20% off your first order, visit mackweldon.com/ATPpodcast and enter promo code ATPpodcast. That's mackweldon.com/ATPpodcast, promo code ATPpodcast for 20% off. Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics.
All right, you want to talk about iPhone rumors?
Sure, why not?
iPhone 13 rumored to include always-on display with 120 Hz ProMotion, astrophotography capabilities, stronger MagSafe, and more. I did not pay too much attention to this because I assumed it was a bunch of BS that nobody really knows yet, but maybe it's not. Who really knows? So what are the highlights on this? Did either of you really dig into this?
I mean, it's early in rumor season, right? But I think, it's early. It's late enough that there could be some nuggets thrown out there, right? What I wanted to start with, we can just go in the order of this headline: always on display for phones. Right. So Apple Watch is in its second generation of always on display, now with a brighter display. It's obviously a much smaller screen, but it's also got a much smaller battery. Lots of Android phones have always on displays to varying degrees. It's an obvious feature for Apple to adopt. They've been a little bit late to this game. It seems plausible to me, whether it comes this year or next year or the year after. I mostly wanted to talk about it in the context of what kind of value, if any, do you think you personally would get from a phone with an always-on display?
I mean, I've seen it on Android phones plenty, and it doesn't seem like a bad feature. Like, I don't think it's a bad idea by any stretch of the imagination. Typically on Android phones that I've seen, it's the current time and little to nothing else, which I don't think is all that terribly useful, especially since on an iPhone, you can just tap the screen and it'll wake right up. That being said, some of the renders on here include like the current temperature and weather conditions, and like how far you are through your music that you're listening to, and how your rings are doing. And that's sort of like ambient information, I guess, sort of kind of in the spirit of, what was the Windows phones, like live tiles or whatever, although not nearly as visually busy. I think that is pretty cool and could be very, very interesting, but it's so hard to say without having seen any of this if this is useful. But it's certainly not the sort of thing that I would, thumb my nose at. Marco, how do you feel?
I think I'm with you. I don't immediately get super excited about this, but I think it really depends on how you use your phone physically. Like, where do you hold it? Where does it sit when you're doing things? For me personally, I'm not a like phone out on the table kind of person. A long time ago, I think it was Scott Simpson who said, probably in a tweet like years ago, something along the lines of like, I know you're a cool person if when we're out to dinner, I never see your phone ever, ever, ever. And that I kind of internalized that. And I try to never be the person who has my phone out unnecessarily. And I'm not the kind of person who, like, when I sit down somewhere, I like empty my pockets onto the table in front of me. And so because I don't do those things, my phone is always either in my hand being operated, in which case the screen is on, or it's in my pocket. And so this feature, I don't think I would get significant value out of, but there are so many people for whom that entire list of qualifications and use patterns is not true, where so many people are just like, their phone is like out on the desk, face up all the time. And so for those people, it could then have similar value as the always on screen on the Apple Watch. So I'm not super excited about this, honestly, but I think it would be a pretty big deal to a lot of people.
I thought this feature was interesting, kind of in the same way that all features that are gated by technology are interesting, right? It's like, why didn't the phone always have an always-on display? Well, battery, right? We know why, right? The screen would take up too much battery. Having it all the time when people aren't looking at it is a waste of battery. It would kill your battery life. Nobody wanted it, right? So OLED screens, which have been in iPhones for several generations now, don't have that problem because you only kind of pay for the pixels you're lighting up. And if you don't light up a lot of pixels, then you can get away with a lot. And the variable refresh rate helps with that too, and bigger batteries and more power efficiency. And so finally technology can give us the feature that we didn't have. But we had all this time where the feature didn't exist. And all that time does a couple of things. One, it kind of cements in a lot of people's minds the idea that, well, I haven't had it before, and it's not immediately obvious to me why I would get any value from it, then I don't need it. It's not a big deal, right? And the flip side of that is, now we've got an always on display. I can think of all these cool things I can do with it. I can show the weather. I can give indications of what kind of things may be available. Like, obviously you can't, or you probably don't want to show actual messages and other notifications, but you can put little red dots or badges or, information that you don't mind, that isn't a privacy violation that you would like to see on your phone. Or being able to have your phone on your bedside to be kind of like your alarm clock with the time always visible. Like, there's tons of applications. Your mind goes wild. It's like, now if I can have an always on display, I have so many great ideas of cool things I could do with that. And I think both of those positions have a little bit of a lack of imagination. Now, obviously the ones of saying, well, I never needed it before, therefore I can't think of any use for it. There's a little bit of a lack of imagination there, because if you have this feature, who knows how you might use it? Who knows what value you might derive from it? Even Marco might find a reason not to have his phone in his pocket. Who knows what it might be, right? But the other side is, and I think people recognize that, like, oh, you're an old fuddy-duddy, you just like things the old way, embrace the new. But the other side is also true, that your mind spins with all these ideas of amazing things you could do and always on display. But it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that having a display that is off when you're not using it also has benefits. Now, we got those benefits for free by accident because we couldn't afford battery life-wise to keep the screen on. But having the screen not be on is absolutely a feature. If it's in a dark room, if you don't want to be disturbed by your phone, right? Because it's been the default, we take those benefits for granted. But if you were, for example, to put out a phone with an always-on display, that you couldn't switch to not do this, that you couldn't say, oh, just when I'm not using my phone, be entirely black, that would be worse than the current phones in many ways that people would find annoying, right? So, and I'm not saying Apple's going to do this. I assume they will give the option, like they do on the watch, to not have the always-on display. But I think it's important to recognize when the technology comes along to finally give us a thing, even when it's a thing that's an obvious thing, like on the watch, that, it's who wants to do a weird motion with your hand to get the watch visible? Everyone wants it to always to be on. Apple's smart enough to say, you know what? That's probably true, and this is a no-brainer for a watch. But sometimes people want to make a different trade-off, with battery life. So you can turn that feature off. And I'm sure there are some people who say, you know what, when I'm not looking at my watch, I want it to be entirely black because I work in sound behind the stage where all the lights are off and I don't want something bright flashing. Or who knows? Everyone has reasons. And even more so on a phone, not having anything visible on your phone when you're not using it is actually a feature. So I hope and expect that if an iPhone comes with an always-on display, that it is merely an option. On by default, sure, because it's cool and everything, right? But that you can turn it off. Now, as for me personally getting value out of this, there are occasions where I will have my phone face up on the end table next to the sofa while I'm watching a TV show or something. And occasionally I will glance at it to see if someone replied to a message that I sent a half an hour ago, or that email finally came in, or even just wonder what the weather's going to be like or whatever, where I will tap the screen to get that information to see the lock screen, or where I'll actually wake it up, right? If I could get that information passively in a well-lit room where my phone is on the end table next to the sofa without having me to go over and say, hey, phone, wake up. Hey, phone, wake up, and tapping it like that, because I do that. I appreciate being able to tap to wake for this very reason. Before I had tap to wake, I don't think I used my phone like this. Once tap to wake became available, I'm like, it's not that much effort to just reach over the table and tap the phone, because I usually have it face up, right? If I didn't have to tap it, that's a benefit to me. And I think I would use this provided I could configure the screen to have the type of information that I would be interested in. The time probably doesn't interest me as much because I got clocks around the house, but, I would take it. So I am cautiously optimistic about the always-on display.
All right, moving right along. 120 hertz ProMotion in the iPhone, because it is in the iPad. It has been for 2 or 3 years now.
Oh, more than that.
Has it been more than that?
It's 120 hertz has been in the iPad since the 10.5-inch iPad Pro.
Oh, well, however long it's been a while. Because I remember sitting in, what was that beloved coffee shop that just folded a couple of years ago at San Jose?
Oh, the slow service, but nice setting. Oh, God, yeah.
Shoot, now it's social policy.
Social distancing, yeah.
Social policy.
Social distancing. Social policy. Anyways, I remember sitting outside there, and someone who maybe should remain nameless walked up with one of them and let us all play with it. And I remember thinking, oh, that's really cool. But to be honest with you, even though I use my iPad a lot to this day, I can't say I ever really noticed the difference, or maybe I turned it off for some reason, although I don't know why I would have. But I don't notice it day to day, and apparently Mike really does, and that's fine. So I don't, again, I'm sure this would be nice. I'm sure it would be cool, but it's not something I feel like I'm yearning for. But ask me again if I have it, and I tell you, it's the best feature in the world. Who knows?
I mean, when the 10.5 launched, I remember the event you're talking about where we were shown one at Social Policy. I remember very clearly, because when you first see 120 hertz on an iPad, it blows your mind. Like when you're used to 60 hertz, and then you see 120, it seems almost unnaturally smooth. I know some people even have a problem with it, and that's why there's actually an accessibility option to turn it off to go back to 60 hertz, because some people are a little bit weird about the motion with it. So it's striking when you see the difference. That being said, I thought when I first saw that, and then when I soon afterwards got my own 10.5 iPad Pro, I thought, oh no, this is going to ruin my phone and my computers and all other displays that I use that are only 60 hertz. But that didn't happen. Instead, I love the way it looks and feels on the iPad, but as I switch between the iPad and the iPhone that doesn't have it, I don't notice that. So I'm sure I'm sure it would be great if they could do it on the phone. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I'm not super excited about it the way everyone else seems to be, because now that I have devices with both, I see wow, this is really cool when I have it. but when I don't have it, I don't notice.
Yeah, I think that's well put.
Yeah, speaking of, this is kind of like the Ethernet thing where there's lots of myths and legends surrounding this with a little bit more science. So the realm I'm thinking of when looking at these rumors is video games, right? There's been debates about video game frame rates forever. In the beginning, it was simple: higher frame rates are better. Eventually, technology advanced to the point where we could get very, very high frame rates, and then the debate began: what is the point of diminishing returns? Can you tell the difference between 30 frames per second and 60? Everyone pretty much agrees, yes, anyone can tell. Can you tell the difference between 60 and 120? Between 120 and 240, right? At what point is it not possible for you personally or people in general to actually notice the difference? What is the point of diminishing returns? And you would think this is an open and shut case that could be measured and tested. And it is extensively measured and tested, and yet gamers are going to be gamers, and they still argue with each other about it because there are many nuances involved here. Plus, there's also latency and response time and a bunch of other stuff that's mostly not related to this. But in the context of the iPhone, I think this is very much like the other technologies that deal with human perception, right? And in general, we've talked about this in the past with music. We've talked about it with displays. Technology is going to advance to the point where further advancement is wasted on our senses, right? So Retina displays, they may not be at the limit, but they're close, right? The whole point of Retina is like, you can't discern the individual pixels. Well, if you have really good eyesight, you can still kind of see them. And if your phone is real close to your face, you can still kind of see them. But we're definitely near the knee in that curve of another doubling or tripling of dots per inch on our phones is really diminishing returns at this point, right? People won't be able to see that difference. Arguably, for the distances most people have their TVs, 8K could be near the knee in that curve. Maybe even 16K. Put it this way: 16K televisions and video for typical television sizes that we have today and distance we sit from them is the point of diminishing returns, right? And I think it's the same deal with frame rate. Obviously, technical limitations keep us from having really high frame rates, plus there's also a battery life issue, but as those dominoes fall and it becomes possible to have higher frame rates, the question becomes, at what point do we not bother adding any more frames per second because nobody can tell the difference? 3060? We can all tell. I've yet to meet someone who can't tell the difference between 30 frames per second and 60, just to give a round number, right? 60 and 120, I think you will start to find people who can't tell between 60 and 120. Even though Marco could definitely tell, some people are less sensitive than others. 120 to 200, 120 to 240, you will find way more people who cannot tell the difference between these two things. Again, potentially the sampling rate of input is not necessarily tied to the frame rate. So the Apple Pencil is sampled at 240 hertz, but the display is 120, right? So there are certain applications where the various things that have to do with how often is the input read and how soon is that input reflected on the screen, that's actually somewhat independent of the frame rate. Apple Pencil could definitely get way more responsive. And there's a video that I linked to on my blog way back when of a demo display showing latencies between input and the reflection of that input going from, 100 milliseconds to 10 milliseconds to 1 millisecond. And it is startling. And we're not close to the point of diminishing returns for example, tracking the tip of your Apple Pencil. But that is mostly independent of how often does the screen update. As if the input was read and correctly tracked by the computer with 1 millisecond of latency, even if the display only updated 120 times a second, it would eventually update to reflect the line that you expected to be there, as opposed to now where it eventually updates to reflect a line that lags a little bit behind where you thought you brought the pencil, right? So those are all mostly independent, but for things like scrolling, I think 120 hertz will put us over the line in terms of smoothness for most people, the majority of people. They're like going to 200 frames per second or 240, at least more than half the population will not notice a difference from 120 to that new thing. But I think 60 is a little bit under people's perception limits. So I think we will spend a long time at 120, and I think that is a reasonable place to hang out for a while, and then we can concentrate on input lag, latency of reading, your touches and the Apple Pencil and all that other stuff while maintaining 120 hertz. And also remember, with variable refresh, part of the reason we can do this without killing the battery is variable refresh allows us not to just repeatedly update the same image 120 times a second and burn your battery when the image isn't changing. So that technology, I mean, again, it's from the iPad and it's widespread everywhere, is what makes this possible, and I think is the real important feature for all these high frame rate things. So I endorse 120 hertz. Like Marco, my wife has an iPad that has it, right? I see it there. I appreciate it. I don't miss it. I play video games at 60 frames per second now in Destiny, where it used to be 30, and that is wonderful. I would like 120 even more. So, obviously using your iPhone and scrolling with your thumb is not the same thing as playing a first-person shooter in a video game, but I can tell you just, the difference of the application. I would love 120 hertz in Destiny. I would like it on my phone.
That's fair. All right, moving right along. Astrophotography capabilities. So I honestly don't know. I'm assuming this means taking pictures of the night sky, and that's going to get better.
Yeah. Do we have any other information on what that? Because typically the needs of astrophotography are typically about taking long exposures so that you can capture useful images at night, but not so long or somehow compensating that it becomes a problem that the stars are moving fairly quickly in the context of a long exposure. So if you take a long exposure, if you take a minute, 2 minutes long exposure, if you're at high enough resolution, the stars that you're shooting will have moved enough that it might cause a very small streak on each star during that exposure time, or whatever the times are. So typically that's what you would need for astrophotography, is some way to compensate for that. So, maybe just making really short exposures that somehow get enough light to make it work. I don't know. I'm curious what this is referring to.
Well, we don't have much, but it says in this Mac Rumors article, the mode will allow the phone to detect different artifacts such as the moon and stars and adjust settings such as exposure accordingly, which doesn't necessarily fix what you're talking about.
Yeah, that sounds like it's just better photo processing for certain subject matter, which is fine. That's a huge part of what makes the cameras on the iPhone so good, but it's certainly not a headlining feature.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's probably making up for a weak area. It sounds to me like basic machine learning. The camera recognizes that what you're taking a picture of is the night sky, and it recognizes that through machine learning and then applies a custom set of image processing that understands, hey, I know image processor, you might see these little pinpricks of light. Don't freak out. It's not noise. Those are stars. You know what a star looks like. Enhance and double down on the stars instead of treating it as noise and trying to smooth it over. And so recognize that is the moon, and recognize that you're going to do an HDR exposure and what the moon is supposed to look. It's machine learning of understanding that you are taking a picture of the night sky, because the night sky is not that varied. There's the moon, there's stars, maybe there's clouds, and that's about it, right? So you know what's going to be there, and so you can make lots of custom machine learning stuff. I don't think this is what Marco was talking about, which is leave the shutter open for 3 hours and get a cool swirly pattern of the stars. I don't think that's what this is about. Third-party apps could surely do that and probably do that now. It's probably just about one more thing that your camera kind of understands what you're taking a picture of and can do a decent job of it. Because I can imagine night sky pictures are probably the type of things that people with iPhones take because they're out at night and they see a pretty sky, want to take a picture of it, and then they're disappointed with the results because all of the phone's sort of default image processing works against the idea of a completely dark background with pinpricks of light.
We are sponsored this week by Flatfile. Nearly everyone has dealt with formatting CSV or Excel files so the data can be correctly imported into an application. It's a pain. Companies of all sizes spend an exorbitant amount of effort trying to fix this problem. Typical solutions might include using CSV templates, emailing Excel files back and forth, or hiring expensive implementations teams. Our friends at Flatfile are working on Concierge, which offers no-code, collaborative workspaces for onboarding data. Invite your customers to securely import, format, or merge their spreadsheet data. No more fumbling with FTP uploads, emailing sensitive Excel files back and forth, or formatting yet another CSV template. Flatfile is on a mission to help companies spend less time formatting spreadsheet data and more time using it. If you're curious to see how they can help your business, visit flatfile.io. That's flatfile.io. Thank you so much to Flatfile for sponsoring our show.
All right, continuing on. Stronger MagSafe. I have yet to use any MagSafe anything, so I don't really know how strong or not strong it is now. I've heard it's not as strong as people expected, but I don't know. Do you guys have more input on this?
Yeah, I use MagSafe all the time because our bedside cable solution is MagSafe. And I must admit, even though it's only, the iPhone 12 series is still fairly new, but I am quite disappointed in how little MagSafe stuff there is so far. I assume there's a good reason. Maybe this is the reason. Maybe the reason is like a lot of stuff was just, it was too hard to make it and to make it good with the existing MagSafe magnet strength. I don't know. But just using like Apple stuff, which is like my solution, it's very low tech, is I just have the MagSafe cable and I have the Apple Watch cable. And I have stuck to the bottom that adhesive that's like the micro suction cups. You know what I'm talking about? Like some things have those. I bought a sheet of that on Amazon, and so I cut out little like discs of it to stick on the bottom. So I have the Apple Watch charger, and then a few inches away I have the phone MagSafe charger, and those are just suction cups stuck to the desk with that special tape. So they just sit like flat on the nightstand. So I've basically made my own unmovable Apple dock. Which is great. I like it better than any other dock I've ever used. Because both things, they stay fixed in place. You can pick up each device with one hand because the things are like, sucked onto the table. So it's great. But that being said, the issue with MagSafe that I have is that even with the Mini, which I think is the easiest phone to align on MagSafe because the MagSafe disc itself is not that much narrower than the Mini. So like you have less kind of slop in one direction to deal with. But even with MagSafe, it's kind of hard to align the phone correctly because the magnets don't pull it so hard to the correct alignment as you'd expect it to. It is kind of difficult. Like I have to kind of wiggle it around sometimes, and sometimes I have it in a way that it does feel like it's stuck on, but it's like an off by one error with the magnet alignment or something. It's like it's slightly off, and so it doesn't charge, and I have to like move it over until it makes a little like thunk ding sound when it's charging. Current MagSafe, I love the concept. The execution has been a little disappointing. I think I still like it better than like unmagnetized Qi charging because it does solve the alignment much of the time, whereas unmodified Qi chargers solve the alignment problem none of the time. So it's nicer than that, but it could be made better. And I think one of the ways it could be made better would be stronger magnets. I think that would also greatly improve things like car mounts, where right now the current MagSafe is not strong enough. I haven't actually tried this, although I've thought about it. Not quite strong enough that you could just like stick a MagSafe disc to some part of your car and stick your phone on it and expect it to stay there. But if the magnets were made stronger, that might be possible. So I could see this being plausible and welcome.
John, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a MagSafe puck. The only thing I use it for is to charge my AirPods, which don't magnetically align to it really in any way intentionally.
This is the most John thing I've ever heard.
So they kind of like, I don't know if you've tried this, but I have the second generation AirPods and the non-Pro ones. The AirPods do have little magnets in them to pull the AirPods in. And there is some interaction between those magnets and the puck, but it's not like it's an intentional interaction. I don't think my AirPod case was designed with that puck in mind because it predates it by so many years, but they do kind of align. But anyway, my phone has MagSafe, and when I first got it, I got the puck with it, and I tried it, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it for a bunch of reasons that have little to do with the feature being bad. I think it's great. For, like Marco said, it's better than not magnets because then you got to align the thing yourself and you're worried about if your thing's charged, right? And there's some complaints about the pucks, which Marco solved by sticking it to the surface or whatever. But anyway, like in general, a good idea. But, in my context, my fuddy-duddy context, I have readily available cables to plug in. And if given the choice, like the extra convenience of putting it on the MagSafe thing didn't outweigh my own, weird paranoia about slower charging, extra heat buildup, all that stuff. And also, to be honest, this is probably the biggest one, marks in the back of my case, right? little circular marks and indentations. And, it's whatever. That's just me, right? It doesn't mean it's a bad feature, right? But the real thing that makes me wary about MagSafe, and especially these rumors of stronger magnets, is the fact that my phone has magnets in the back of it now. Now, I have a case on it that is not a quote-unquote MagSafe case that somehow conveys the magnetic strength through either by having their own magnets, aligned the same way as the regular magnets or whatever. Like my case has no magnets in it whatsoever. So it provides a gap between the magnets that are inside my phone and the outside world. It's kind of also one of the reasons why I didn't want one of the Apple cases, because they do have the little magnet rings thing whose sole purpose is to make it so that the strength of your magnet is not as diminished by the fact that you have a case on it. But I put, as we've discussed in past shows, I put my phone in my right pocket of my jacket with my wallet that's filled with credit cards that have mag stripes. Now, I know mag stripes are prehistoric and everyone has the tap cards now and everyone has the chip cards now, and who cares about the mag stripe? But again, worrying about the marks on the back of my phone, I'm also kind of worried about even stronger magnets in the back of my phone being next to my wallet in my pocket. There's probably enough gap there with the case and the leather of my wallet and all the other stuff that it's not a big deal. And yeah, who knows when I'm ever going to use my mag stripes. But having powerful magnets on the back of your phone is not the type of thing that you can get rid of because they're embedded in the phone. You can't turn them off. They're not electromagnets. They're like permanent magnets, right? And, there was some articles going around about how Apple recommends that you not put like your phone in your breast pocket if you have a pacemaker, right? Now, to some degree, people with pacemakers and other medical devices that are sensitive to magnetic fields have to be aware that there are many products in the world that could potentially have powerful magnets in them that are a danger to them. So it's not like Apple is doing anything necessarily wrong by doing this and putting magnets in them for the convenience of most people, because the people who have, medical devices that are sensitive to magnets just have to be aware of that. But I think a non-optional, increasingly powerful permanent magnet in the back of my phone is not something that I think pays for its convenience, right? So I get that there's an alignment issue with wireless charging. I would prefer a solution that either mechanical alignment, which is the thing that you can do. You can have things aligned by having a little notch or a nubbin or other sorts of things, right? I know it's not as elegant, but it can be done, right? Or a non-fire inducing air power type thing, which is like, hey, but just don't worry about it. Just chuck your phone on the thing, and however it's aligned, we will magically figure it out under the covers to make sure we charge it in as fast as possible way, given the alignment and so on and so forth. We don't have either one of those things, so magnets may be the best bet, right? But due to the unique nature of the phone, or not unique, but the special nature of the phone, it is unlike, for example, MagSafe on a laptop, because most people are not holding the magnetic parts of either part of their laptop or the charger up to their body. But phones go in your pockets right next to your body all the time, next to other things in your pockets, unlike things like your AirPods case, your laptop, all the scenarios in real life. Like my faucet has like a little thing that you pull out of it to, that you can just pull the end of the faucet out and it's got the long hose so you can spray in different places. Mm-hmm. That goes back in with a little magnet. There are many applications where magnets for alignment is a great idea, but for a rectangular thing that I stick in the pockets of all of my clothes, I'm not super enthusiastic about them making those magnets more powerful. Now, I agree that the current set of magnets are a little bit wimpy and seem not to give all the benefits you'd want them to have, but I don't know if the solution is stronger magnets. So I'm kind of hoping this rumor is bogus, or if they're stronger, they'll be stronger by such a small degree that no one will even notice, but not looking forward to this.
All right. Anything else? Finer matte finish on the back. That sounds good.
No, that could be huge. I mean, well,
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, we talk a lot on podcasts every year about the details of the iPhone surface treatments, both visually and how they, how grippy they are, how easy they are to hold, and everything. And this is largely an academic discussion because effectively nobody doesn't use a case. I haven't been using a case in my Mini. And it's almost weird that I don't. And whenever anybody learns this fact, they're like, what?
Mm-hmm. So they say, are you an Apple executive?
And when I look around in the world, and I try to take notice how many phones I see without a case. granted, I haven't been seeing as many people as you would in a normal year, but it's basically zero. It's as close as you can get to zero. Like, especially because I haven't seen John Gruber yet this year, so that would at least make it one. But it's basically zero people that don't have a case except me, and so this kind of thing probably doesn't matter. However, the current line of Pro phones, I think, made gripability significantly worse. We all thought that like the new flat-sided design and everything would be a huge improvement for handholdability, and I think on the Pro line it largely hasn't been. Now on the non-Pro line, because the aluminum is textured instead of like that polished steel, and because the glass has it's like a kind of a flat glass back, so it's kind of tacky as opposed to the like kind of sandblasted glass back that the Pros have. The Pros actually, again, I think they got less handholdable this generation. And so if you care about nice handholdability, the non-Pro phones this year are the way to go. And I think it must bother Apple that anything about the non-Pro phones is significantly better than the Pro phones. Like, I think they want it to be a pretty clear distinction. The Pro phones should be better in every way. So to have something go the other direction would probably irritate them. In addition, some of the people who I've seen not use cases are Apple executives, as you said. So like, probably they want to correct this. They probably want to. They probably want the Pro phones to both look the best, feel the best, and be the best. And so I would expect for feeling the best, that kind of matte texture on the back would be, or some kind of change to the texture on the back would have a chance of being a very good thing. And I would also hope that they get rid of this super highly polished stainless steel case band design on the Pros, because that does not look the best once anybody has touched it. That being said, again, all of this is academic because most people put cases on their phones, and so most people never even see or touch the actual raw sides or back of their phones.
I like the steel, the shiny steel. I know people complain about fingerprints, but like, you're going to touch it. It's going to have fingerprints. Even with fingerprints, I think it looks nicer. And more importantly, it feels nicer. Like, I use my phone without a case for a whole day or two before, whatever. I tried to use it for a while without the case, and it feels like a really nice object. But I agree with Marco and everybody else that the non-Pro phone actually has better gripability. And it's interesting because the non-Pro phone's back gripability is because it's perceived as being grippier because it actually is glossy on the back, right? The matte one feels slipperier in the vein of, what was the slipperiest one? The iPhone 6? That was like,
the one that was made of Teflon.
A bar of soap. Yeah. So like when you have very glossy glass, it's very very grippy right up to the point where you have a dollop of moisture and then it becomes slick as anything, right? So I think we perceive the non-Pro phone as being grippier because we're gripping it with essentially dry hands. But in real life, maybe if you got a little bit of water on your hand and tried to grab your phone with a slick glass back, maybe it would be different. But either way, this rumor is that they're changing the matte back with a grippier, more comfortable feeling. So it sounds like they're sticking with matte. Like the current Pro has a matte glass back, as in it looks like frosted glass, right? And that feels slipperier to us because it's very finely textured frosted glass, and it's kind of like the back of like the iPhone 6 was, where it was like a matte kind of aluminum thing. It feels slippery because it's not like the glossy glass that is grippy, where you get that squeaky sound where it's like, oh, I can really grip on this, right? But it's also not fuzzy like a leather case where you actually get real grip on it. It's the worst of both worlds. So this rumor is that they have improved the matte back to be grippier than it was. I don't know what that means. I don't know how you can make it matte but even grippier. Or does that mean make the texture less fine? So if you looked at it under a microscope, the matteness would be higher hills and valleys? Does it mean they would actually... Now here's the thing. Naked robotic core is my whole deal. I've been talking about it for years, right? Apple continues to not do the obvious other solution, which is make your naked robotic core really grippy by not making it out of quote-unquote premium materials, by putting wear surfaces on the naked robotic core. They've never done that. They've stuck with the naked robotic core, which is, here is as small as we can make this phone. All the surfaces are hard. Put a soft case on it. Express yourself. Make it grippy. Do whatever you want. But if we actually put essentially wear surfaces on the outside of the phone, people might like it, but then they will wear them out. And that's your actual phone. You can't remove it. When someone destroys their case or wears it out, they take it off and they get a new case, right? If the back of the phone, like my stupid Microsoft mouse, was made of soft touch rubber, once you destroyed the back of your soft touch rubber phone, it would be like, oh, my phone is all gross now. And I can't take it off because it's part of the phone, right? So I don't fault Apple for not taking this approach. They are very committed to Naked Robotic Core. I think it's the right approach because, like Marco said, the vast majority of people just put a case on it, in which case they are benefiting from Naked Robotic Core, which is make the phone as small and beautiful as you can get it. And then you have the option to put whatever cases on you want. And if you're a weirdo like Gruber, an Apple executive, or Marco now, and you want to use it without a case, guess what? You got the smallest phone possible with really premium surfaces that don't wear out like my stupid Microsoft mouse, and everyone's happy, right? But I continue to think about maybe one model of phone that is a little bit chunkier, that has actual, I'm calling them wear surfaces, and it's a derogatory way of saying they eventually wear down, but that has surfaces on them that are not hard, durable materials, but instead are designed to be grippy. And it's weird because I think that phone would get the reputation as the grippy phone, which makes no sense because every phone is the grippy phone. If you just buy one and put a super grippy case on it, you've got a grippy phone. But it's like, yeah, but you buy this one, whatever model this is, the iPhone 15, Pro Rugged Edition. I don't know. Someone can come on the fly with some sort of branding name for this or whatever. That the actual phone itself is like a Makita power tool. It has like plastic and rubber all over it, and like it is just a grippy thing or whatever, maybe not go that low end, but like something, a premium feeling, actual grippy material that the phone is made out of.
What about like the iPhone 5C plastic? That felt great. The iPhone 3G and 3GS, also plastic, also felt great.
Very shiny plastic. But I mean, I'm thinking more of like devices, like I think of power tools because very often they are made to have positive grip and to also be durable. You don't want the handle of your power drill to wear out, but you also don't want it to be made of glossy plastic.
Yeah, fair enough. But one other huge benefit to this is that compared to the phone that has metal and glass on it that you're putting plastic on top of, the phone that actually is made of plastic to begin with would be significantly smaller and lighter weight because metal and glass are heavy. And, you would be replacing some of that frame. I mean, there would have to be some kind of structural, probably interior metal frame for some part of it for support or rigidity or whatever. But the resulting product would be significantly smaller and lighter and simpler than a metal and glass phone with a plastic case added to it aftermarket.
Yeah, the tricky part is the screen still because, OLED screens are flexible. You can roll them up, right? But the glass surface of the phones is part of the experience of using an iPhone. Like, it's part of the reason the original iPhone, they ditched the plastic one and went with glass because running your finger across a plastic screen is not great. No matter what kind of plastic they make it out of, glass just feels better. And glass, unfortunately, is not super enthusiastic about bending a lot. So plastic, I think, is a great idea for a phone. You mentioned having a metal frame for rigidity. Part of the reason it needs that rigidity is the glass. Part of the reason, of course, is the printed circuit board, which also kind of doesn't like to be bent. But yeah, plastic could go setting aside the grippiness, plastic could go a long way towards reducing weight and increasing durability of phones, but Apple feels shy about that because people didn't like the iPhone 5C. I thought it was great. I still think the iPhone 5C is a great phone, but it didn't sell well, and I think Apple may have taken the wrong lesson from that. That we shouldn't make a plastic phone, when in reality, just the price and features of the 5C, given the line that was around it, was not right. So I think there's two separate things. One, make a phone out of materials that are not aluminum, steel, or glass, but it still is essentially a premium phone. It still would be the Naked Robotic Core. And two, make a ruggedized phone that comes out of the box as a beefier, bigger battery, more grippy, with what I keep calling wear surfaces all over the thing. But those are extremely diversified models. I feel like Apple's iPhone line is now perhaps as diversified as it's ever going to get. I'm not sure Apple has an appetite to go into the more exotic realms. I feel like that is more the domain of Android phones where there's more variability, because Apple does have a brand. And I think with the current phone lineup, they're covering so many bases. If you want a small phone that's good, they sell one. If you want a gigantic phone that's good, they sell one. If you want a quote unquote normal sized phone that's good, they sell a couple. they've pretty much covered the market as well as they need to, given current phone technology. So I don't expect them to do either one of these things, and I don't, think I couldn't even make a strong pitch for it. But it would certainly be cool, mostly because it's a thing they haven't tried yet. Because everyone uses the case, and Naked Robotic Core has served them so well, they haven't even looked at that other thing. And I just think it would be a fun variation. Now, all that said, this rumor about a matte back that's grippier, I think it's going to be one of those things where if they mention it at all, it'll be like, and we improved the matte back, so it's a little bit grippier, and none of us will be able to tell.
Yeah. By the way, while you're on the subject of the variability of the lineup, all these rumors that the iPhone mini is like not selling at all and they're going to discontinue it. Boy, I hope that's wrong, because I love the iPhone mini still. I'm a big fan. The size feels totally normal to me now. Every other phone feels like a giant monster phone to me now. Like it's so nice and small and light, and it fits nicely in my pocket. And I never get that feeling when like I sit down and like whenever I've like tried a Plus phone here and there, like you sit down and it's like a line slightly wrong in your pocket and you got to like shift around or move it over. Like I've never had that happen with the mini. It's just delightful. I'm so happy with it. And I really, really hope they continue to make flagship small phones.
I can't remember if I said this on Twitter or here or both, but like the idea that Apple would bail on the mini because it sells less. Of course it sells less. That's what diversifying the line means. You have the sort of the mainstream phones that most people buy, and when you make the weirder models, fewer people are going to buy them. That's the whole point of diversifying your line, is you want to address smaller and smaller subsets of the market. You do it after you've satisfied the fat part of the bell curve, and then you go after the edges. And yeah, you introduce a little phone, fewer people are going to buy it. Now, it could be, it's not that it's fewer than we even thought it would be. It's fewer than projections. And kind of like the stock market in business, very often you make some wild-ass guess about how many you're going to sell, and if you don't meet that expectation, it's worse than if you had sold the exact same number of phones but had predicted a lower number and exceeded it, which doesn't make any sense, but that's just human nature. So, but as with so many of these things, yeah, Apple, you're going to sell fewer of them, stick to it. Because if you didn't sell like 0.5% of what you thought, just keep doing it, because honestly, the technological investment, like, what did I talk about this before? Like Star Wars, Disney bailing on Star Wars after they had some trouble with the franchise. Part of what makes people, know and trust your brand is you not immediately running at the first sign of trouble in a product line. The people who love the mini really love it. You may be disappointed that there aren't more of them and that it costs you so much money to get this whole other production line up and running. But honestly, you should just eat that, because having extremely loyal mini customers in your camp and having them give you 37% margins on their purchase instead of 38.5% margins, just make the bean counter swallow it and keep making the mini. Honestly, like, it's not this terrible disaster where Apple's losing money. They make so much money they don't even know what to do with it. They can't give away their cash fast enough. Keep making the mini, for crying out loud.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Mack Weldon, Linode, and Flatfile. And thank you to our members who support us directly. You can join at atp.fm/join. We will talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I have been eyeballing this for a while, and finally I just decided to pull the trigger. I got myself a DJI Mini 2 drone.
Oh, nice. Those look so fun.
Oh, it is so much fun. I know not what I'm doing, and one of the scary things about the Mini is that it doesn't have the accident avoidance that yours does, Marco. Like, it doesn't have forward and rear sensors to prevent it from running into things. Oh man, though, it's so much fun, and it's so weirdsy. It's so adorable. It's like the drone adorable edition.
Mm-hmm. Did you get the drone care plan that they offer? So that like if you do crash into something, it's no big deal?
I did. They do have like an Apple Care Plus thing, and I put it off, and then it was like, you have to do this within 2 days, and that was this morning, and so I was like, fine. So for $50, I get like 2 replacements, I think, or something. Well, I think I still have to pay for them a little bit, just like you do with Apple Care, but significantly cheaper replacements if I do something extremely terrible. And I figure at least for the first year, while I don't know what I'm doing, it seemed like a reasonable thing to do. But I got the DJI Mini 2 Fly More combo, which basically means it gives you some extra batteries, which actually are worth discussing. It gives you a controller, which I guess it doesn't come with, generally speaking, some extra propellers, and I forget what else. But I freaking love this thing. It is completely stupid and useless and wasteful. And oh my God, it's so much fun.
That's awesome.
It could be useful, or spying on your neighbors, menacing pets. Are we going to see some like Instagram stories of drone footage of you flying through cool things?
I don't know. I don't think so. So my intention with this was just to get something. I feel like I need something a little bit happy after the last year. I don't think that's unreasonable. And
Casey, you're an adult. You're a professional. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to excuse it. It's a fun toy. You're a tech podcaster. It's fine.
So anyway, I wanted to give myself a little treat, and I got myself a treat. But I figure on occasion, I think it will be nice to have. So as an example, like a listener of the show was kind enough to lend me, I forget what model it was, but I think it was an earlier version of your current drone, Marco. Because what do you have? You have the something?
I have the Mavic 2 Pro. Okay, I think it came out like 2 years ago, but not the one with the zoom lens, the one with the big sensor.
So I think I had borrowed from this very kind of listener, Eric, a previous version of that, and it was phenomenal. There are definitely a couple of things about it that I miss. For example, the accident avoidance, because it this thing, the big guys will, I guess they have like IR sensors or something or sonar or something on the front, where radar, such that it will try not to run into walls or trees or what have you. But the Mini does not. The advantages of the Mini, other than being cheap, are that it's quite small. It is stunningly small. And it's under the magic 250-gram limit that certainly America and I think other countries have decided that if a drone is under 250 grams, it's considered like a complete and utter toy rather than something that could arguably be used, professionally. Now, naturally, there's nothing stopping me from using this professionally. I would need to go get, my FAA certification and what have you. But I could. It's not that it's a decent enough drone that I think I could do it. But the point is that like you don't have to register it with the FAA. And there's some I think a couple other differences. Check with your local jurisdictions and what have you. But it's portable. It's super portable. Like Eric, when he lent me his drone, it came in this huge backpack because the drone is not small and so on and so forth. But the thing is so tiny. Like the bag it came in is like the size of an average purse, I would say. And I've been really enjoying using it. And the thing moves. Like when I was borrowing the whatever Mavic it was, I don't recall exactly the model number. But when I was borrowing that Mavic, like I kept it on super slow mode because I was so scared I was going to break this, fellow's drone and have to send him like a carcass back in the mail. He was kind enough to ship me this drone and say borrow it for a couple of weeks, and I didn't want to have to ship a carcass back. And so I was using it in super slow mode. Well, even the Mini, when you put it in sport mode, will do 30 miles an hour. Which is nuts. It's like this little, it's 250 grams and it'll do, I think it's a little shy of 30, but it has a readout on your phone screen and it says, 28, 29 miles an hour or something like that. It's bananas. But so much of the tech is so cool. And just as someone who appreciates good engineering, and I think I speak for all three of us in saying that, it's just so cool that so much incredible technology is in this little tiny device. And if you've never really used a drone, like it in and of itself, it's exactly what you would think, right? You can make it go up, down, you can make it spin, you can go left or right, you can forward and back. But there's so many cool things you can do. And as silly as it sounds, and anyone who has flown a drone in the last 15 years knows this already, but you can fly it wherever and say, come home, please. And sure enough, it will ascend to whatever the stated come home altitude is to make sure it gets over trees and other obstacles. It will fly over you at a couple hundred feet and then descend down directly in front of you. And it's the coolest thing. Like, it is so freaking cool. And when you're flying it on your phone screen, so you the way it works, at least for DJI drones that I've used, is you stick your phone in a like holster within this controller, a controller like you would use for like an RC car. And you hook a cable up into the lightning port, and that's your viewfinder, if you will. And it shows you, what the drone sees, but you can also call up a map and see exactly where the drone is in relation to you, and so on and so forth. And so much of this is so cool. And the DJI Fly app is surprisingly good for a company that you would think would probably have a mediocre at best app. It lets you do like playback of the route that you took in so far as you can watch the little arrow like dance around on the map, and it'll even show you the messages it sends you, like, oh, this is where the wind was too strong or what have you. I don't know. This is so cool and so much fun, and I'm so glad I got it. Now, ask me again in 2 months, I'll probably be like, oh, yeah, that's right. I do have a drone. I forgot about that. But sitting here now,
That's how
3
it goes.
days in, it is the coolest thing, and I cannot recommend it enough. They're not a sponsor. They should be. But the Mini 2 is so fun and so neat. And I did, Erin was taking Penny on a walk in the neighborhood. And so I did fly, like I tracked her down and flew and was kind of flying behind her, trying to get a cinematic video. I'm not going to post this anywhere for several reasons, but I was trying to get like a cinematic looking video of her. And when she got home, she said, you got to be careful with that. And I was like, well, yeah. And thinking that maybe I flew too close to a tree and I didn't realize it or something. And she said, well, as you were chasing me, which was fine, there was a guy getting out of his car at his house, and he was looking at that drone and looking at me and looking at that drone and looking at me, and he was like, huh. And definitely was like looking at me funny, says Erin. And so I guess she was like, to try to make it like less awkward, she says to Penny, the dog, oh, Daddy's using his drone again, that silly fellow. Whatever, I forget what she said. Something like that, to indicate that it's not like some freaking creepers. Well, I mean, arguably I was a creeper.
Yeah.
But
Are you going to get the neighborhood watch on your back or whatever? The homeowners association? Sorry, no drones in the neighborhood, Casey. New rule.
And it's funny because my reign in the homeowners association is a month away from being done. So you never know. It very well could happen.
Yeah, that rule's coming down on you hard soon. Yeah, you're under the FAA limit, but guess what? The neighborhood limit is 0 grams.
Oh, it's so true. And I'm just waiting for the next door post. Like, hey, I hear this drone buzzing my hat. Which
who's doing this? We don't need the leaf blowers are bad enough. I don't need to hear drones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so true.
I don't know if it's all the post-apocalyptic literature and movies and televisions that I'm super into, but every time I see these drones, I think of how incredibly useful they are in any kind of sort of zombie apocalypse, end of the world scenario, where they're like, you need to have sort of, situational awareness and if there's some kind of threat, right, where you need to know what's around you and who's what and where, and just that, if you had told me as a kid that you'd be able to buy something like this drone for a couple $100 and like how amazing it is and what it does, and that you could just buy one and have this. Like, obviously there are military drones and all sorts of other applications that like the real uses, but like whoever does the next end of the world story with modern technology and smartphones and everything, like I can, whatever the threat is, whether it's other people or zombies or who knows, aliens or whatever, having ready access to drones to just grab them from a store and charge them up, assuming there's electricity in this end of the world story, and fly them out to see to surveil your perimeter and everything. It's so science fiction. I'm so old. I just can't get over how cool it is. Like, just you just go to the website, how amazing it is. You can just fly anywhere in any direction with live video in essentially disposable hardware, disposable from the perspective of like, there's no humans in it, and it's a couple $100, and in the apocalypse there's warehouses full of these things, so just grab them and fortify your castle with drones and just have them flying constantly. Of course the noise is something, but it still beats leaf blowers.
Yeah, totally.
Not by much, but it does.
Not by a lot. And it's, I don't know, I just find it so fascinating, like leaving aside the engineering of it. I just think it's such a nifty change of perspective. And I mean that in both the literal and the figurative senses, that it's not often that I get to look down on the roof of my house, and as it turns out, we're going to be doing an addition sometime in the next couple of months. And one of the things I'm excited to do is not like film it happening, but maybe at the end of each day after the crew leaves, take an overhead shot, because it's an external thing that's happening, take an overhead shot of the progress, right? And just kind of have maybe not literally a time lapse, but be able to go through the week or 2 weeks or month or whatever it's going to take them to build it, and see the progress happening, not in real time, but so to speak in real time. And I'm really looking forward to that. And plus, the time that we had borrowed that drone from that extremely kind listener, it was when we were at Cape Charles, and whenever we can start vacationing properly again, I'm really looking forward to, when it's appropriate, when it's legal, etc., being able to take a couple of videos like that. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes of it. It can be just a few minutes. But the videos we captured at Cape Charles a few years ago when we were borrowing that drone were super cool. And I don't think anyone else would really care that much, but I thought they were phenomenally cool. And I'm really excited to be able to do that sort of thing, and to be able to get just a different perspective on life and document that. And I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think this is a topic maybe for another day, but I think it's fun for me and very neat. And I'm very lucky to be able to have a kind of an arsenal or a tool chest that I can use when it comes to capturing moments, because I have the GoPro, and I've used it, as I think we mentioned just a week or two ago. I use the GoPro for even just silly things like sticking it on a window so I can see how and when Penny is escaping from her pen that we put her in. And the GoPro can be used to film Declan back when swimming lessons were a thing and we weren't allergic to the indoors. I can bring that in the pool with me and Declan when we're doing a swimming lesson or free swim or whatever, and film him underwater and film him, and not worry about this breaking, like you were saying about this disposable to some degree, John. And having a proper camera with a zoom lens, granted it is a pain in the ass in a lot of ways, but nevertheless, it is also cool to be able to take out this camera and be a little bit further away from my family and taking more candid shots of them. Having all of these different tools and now a drone in my arsenal, I really, really enjoy it. And it's really, really neat to be able to have all these different tools in your tool chest to be able to use the right tool for the job at the right time, which of course, 99% of the time is just my damn phone. But nevertheless, when you have some amounts of, ability to plan, it is really, really cool. So with that said, Marco, you haven't touched your drone in 2 years, I assume?
Yeah, about a year, but that's, I bought it for a purpose. We were also doing some construction, and I wanted the same thing that you were saying, to be able to, take, capture some of it going on. And it was good for that. And then, it was also nice just as a novelty, the year of having this, the first year I had, having this thing as this great novelty where, I brought it to the family gathering at Christmas, and they live in a rural area, and so we were zoomed up and showed their whole their property, and zoomed down to someone else's house, hey, here's an overhead picture of your house, and it was fun. There's a lot of novelty value to drones, as long as you're in an area where you're not around a lot of other people, because they are super annoying. But we were lucky that we were in two such areas where there were not a lot of people, so it was wonderful. And it was a great novelty to bring it around that first year. And then the novelty has worn off, and it's sitting on the shelf, and I'm going through a big wave of cleaning out and trying to get rid of a lot of stuff and sell some stuff and give some stuff away. And I was just thinking today, should I give away the drone or sell the drone? I was just thinking about that literally earlier today, not knowing you'd done this. Because mine's also significantly larger than yours, and so that means everything about it. The batteries, the chargers, everything about it is bigger. And
the noise level.
Maybe. Yes, I don't know.
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't say it's dramatically different. And granted, I haven't heard a Mavic in a couple of years now, but my vague recollection is that it is noticeably louder. The Mavic, the big guys, are noticeably louder than the one that I have.
Yeah, and the one that you have, it has, as you mentioned, it has a few limitations compared to mine, and the image quality is a little bit different because it's a much smaller design. But yeah, I mean, no question, if I were buying new today, I would buy the one you bought, exactly that one, because I was basically using it, as you are, kind of as a toy.
Right.
I don't have professional needs. I bought the one I bought at the time I bought it, which was, probably about 3 years ago now. It was a while ago. It was as soon as the Mavic 2 came out. I bought it that week. I bought the one I bought at the time because that was the one that I knew would be easiest for me to operate, because it had all those convenience features. It had the return to home thing and all the protective features to protect you from being too likely to crash it into a lake or a house.
Yeah.
You know, like it would automatically fly. It also, like, mine automatically flies home if it's getting to the point where it's not going to have enough battery life to make it home.
Yep. Same.
So that way, like, again, it kind of saves you from yourself and stuff like that. So, like, there are all sorts of like little convenience features. You know, the anti-crashing into things sensors that make it so that this was going to be really nice for my both needs and my skill level.
Yeah.
But now, you know, the one you got, the Mini 2, it's so much smaller and so much, like, I feel like that makes it a lot more delightful in certain ways. It also makes it a lot smaller to fit in a bag.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And I would imagine, because it's so much lighter weight, you probably need less battery weight and battery bulk as well to get the same amount of flight time.
I would suspect. So this thing will do about 20 to 30 minutes, you know, depending on wind and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's I'm glad you brought that up, because like I said earlier, the particular setup that Eric had lent me, it was in a fairly large backpack, and, you know, there were plenty of accessories in it. So it could have been in a smaller container, but it was the sort of thing where it was definitely a burden, or at least a conscious decision to bring the drone anywhere in the couple of weeks that he let me borrow it. Whereas this, it's certainly still a decision, but it's a lot more casual. Like, why not? You know, well, I'll just throw it in and can't hurt. And that I really like. I mean, it's small enough that I would consider, if I was going on like an airplane. Do you remember airplanes? I don't know if I do. If I was going on like an airplane vacation, I would consider bringing it, because it's not, you know, tremendous. I'm not sure that I would, and certainly depend on where I would be going, but it's small enough that it could hypothetically work. A couple of quick things in case you're interested in this sort of thing and potentially buying one. The Flymore combo, I think I'd mentioned, comes with like this, with 3 batteries, but it also comes with a battery like charger thing where you can slot all 3 batteries into it, and it charges via USB-C. And what it'll do is it'll just charge. Yeah, it's USB-C, and it'll charge whatever battery is closest to full first, and then it will charge the next one, and then the next one. But additionally, and this is relevant because we're supposed to get a bunch of ice overnight, it will also act as a just standard battery, you know, like charger, so, like the other direction. So it has a USB A, B, I always get it wrong. A standard USB.
Oh, yeah, USB out port.
Exactly. Now, that one's USB old. It's not USB-C.
Yeah, it's A.
But I could hook up like a standard lightning cable to this triplet of batteries and charge my phone if our power goes out overnight, which is super convenient, especially if you're traveling. And so I really dig that. And apparently, like, getting the batteries in and out of the Mini 1 was a real pain, and it's super easy on this one. Additionally, the controller does not have any sort of screen on it. Like, my recollection of the Mavic that I had borrowed was that it had like some basic readouts, like what mode you're in, what height you're at, I think how much battery time was left. Does yours have some sort of like LCD on it?
Yeah,
Marco,
it's very similar to that, yeah.
Okay. Well, this has no screen whatsoever, which is fine, but in a perfect world, it would be neat to have that on the controller as well.
I mean, honestly, I never use that screen. Like, I'm always just looking at my phone screen when I operate it.
Oh, and also the phone is above the controller, not below, which I don't think was the case on the Mavic that I used. The phone was below the controller when it was all mounted up, and the phone sits above the controller, which is really nice, and I much prefer that. Do you remember how yours is? I know it's been a minute since you used
my phone sits below. Mine's the old style.
Okay.
I am curious, though. I don't think that... Are you aware of the goggles?
Yes, actually.
I know. Are those compatible with the Mini yet?
I don't think so, but I haven't looked into it. And Eric had a set for his, I believe it was a Mavic. I might be misspeaking. He had a set for his Mavic, which I tried like once or twice and was freaking trippy. Very cool. Super cool. Very weird though.
That's how the drone racers do the racing. Have you seen those? You ever see the drone races?
Yes. Yep.
Right. And it amazes me that I mean, if you watch them doing the races, like the drones are flying so fast that you're like, how can anybody possibly be controlling that? And you're like, well, they have these goggles, let them see what the drone is seeing, and then you see what they're seeing, and like, nope, doesn't help. I don't understand.
It's so true.
Because like viewing through the lens of that thing, it's like they're still going so fast. How are they doing this? I mean, I suppose it's like any other thing, like racing or video games or whatever, where it's just practice and skill, and probably a lot of crashes in the case of drones. Because unlike being in a race car, if you crash a drone, you know, you don't die. So, but it is amazing, and yeah, it is very. I think the trippiest thing would have to be kind of like Marco was talking about with the VR stuff of like if what you're seeing is a thing that is progressing through space, and yet you are standing still. That's got to be disconcerting and potentially motion sickness inducing. But yeah, with the speeds these things go, the other thing is just plain reflexes, and just, talk about flinching. When you run this thing into a wall, it's going to feel like you hit it with your own head, right?
Yeah, seriously. I don't know. But yeah, so I mean, I kind of wish I had the screen, but not a big deal. And the other thing I don't like is that if I wanted to on the Mavic, I think you would push down and twist a little bit to pop off the propellers. And with this, and I believe this is the only DJI drone where this is the case, they actually are screwed in, which is a little bit of a pain, and I don't love. But all in all,
why are you taking off the propellers?
No, not that. I wouldn't, generally speaking, but like if I was going to leave the drone alone for a while, just so I don't break them, I would occasionally take them off. Or like when I shipped them back to Eric, I took them off. So generally, not a big deal. And eventually it'll end up that I will break one of these propellers, and hopefully not the whole drone. And so I will need to replace one, and that'll be a little bit of a pain. But all things being equal, with the Fly More combo, I think was $600 if I'm not mistaken. So that's the drone, the case, the batteries, the controller, with some extra propellers. And I really am so sitting here now. I'm so glad I spent the money. I think it's so much fun. And I think it really will be a neat and novel thing to have from time to time. I'm sure, in the next couple of months, I'll go from using it every day to like once a week to like once a month to, oh yeah, I have a drone.
Yep.
But nevertheless, it is super neat and super cool. And if you have a burning desire to spend a few $100, first of all, atp.fm/join. And then after that, you can go to DJI or Amazon or what have you and check it out. I just think it's super cool.
This just strikes me as one of those toys that if I got it, I would just be angry at how unappreciative my children are of the amazing technology in the world that they live. Because how much I would have killed for this as a kid. And they'd be like, yeah, it's a drone. So what?
Yeah, it's so true.
Do you understand? It's like, yeah, I don't know what the equivalent is going to be when they're old people and are angry at the children aren't amazed by some new technology, but these drones are it. Like just phenomenal. I can't even believe they're real.
They are so amazing. Like I remember, like the drone I have, which is again like 3 years old. Like the pictures it takes, the video it takes. I'm like, this is better than almost any camera I've ever owned, and it flies.
Yeah, I know, right?
And it costs less than most of the fancy cameras do.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous. Like you're right. Like you almost can't believe that it's real. That like technology, like this is one of those products that you use it and you're like, wow, technology is amazing. Like I can't believe that we can do this. And what's especially impressive too is just how incredibly good the gimbal is, and the combination of the gimbal and the actual the flight control of all the rotors is such that like you can fly it up in the air, and it can be a decently breezy day, and you look at the video afterwards and it is not moving. Like it is rock steady, and you're like, how is that possible? This thing is hovering 400 feet in the air on a windy day, and I'm like gently moving it, and it doesn't rock back and forth at all. There's no shake. It's shocking how good, like how stable it is. How of course, and this thing has a great sensor, so it's like how clear and sharp everything is. It is mind blowing how good this technology is. For granted, I'm not gonna say it's cheap. It's not. These aren't low prices. As you said, like $600 is a pretty good entry point for like a decent mid range drone. But for that price, considering that it happens to also be an amazing camera that flies, that's pretty amazing. Like and especially when you compare the quality of that to a $600 point and shoot camera, like you're almost getting the flying for free. it's really unbelievable how good these are.
I mean, this is kind of the aviation equivalent of computational photography. Setting aside the photography, just the flying thing, the reason all these drones exist is because computers and software, advanced and shrunk to the point where we could both fit them in a device that doesn't weigh too much. So you need, die shrinks and smaller feature sets and more efficient circuits so you can have a smaller battery that doesn't weigh as much. And then software-wise, the control software to be able to put essentially a bunch of dumb motors and servos in here being controlled by a very complicated computer program that is fast and responsive with all the various sensors, accelerometers, and gyroscopes to be able to stay in the air. I remember as a kid watching the precursor to all of these drones, which was like university projects where they would take some computer and connect it with an umbilical cord, because they couldn't actually put it in the flying thing. Connect a flying thing with an umbilical cord to this huge array of computers, and these computers would be trying to control the flying thing with some really complicated software program that some grad student wrote to figure out, oh, when you're tipping this way, change your rotor angle that way, and do, to eventually essentially be a drone. And they made it look so hard, right? Because the drones were, everything cost $1 bazillion. It was tethered to a giant cable that looked like a pool hose, or it wasn't even just like an extension cord. It was this huge cable connected up to a wall of the most expensive computers that they could buy, and the thing would crash all over the place, right? And it's just, we needed to just get over that hump where it's like, can we get the electronics small enough? Can we figure out this software problem? And once we got over that hump, it's like, guess what? You don't have to be tethered anymore. We can put the computer in there, and guess what? We figured out the basic software program to more or less stay in the air. And then that was it. Like, there's just like this discontinuity of, like, before, this was not a thing that you could even have, and now it is well known enough, and the technology is widely available enough that it costs less than a good laptop. Right? It literally costs less than a good laptop because we cracked this problem. This is what's so exciting about technology, that like something that seems so hard as to almost be impossible, and then we get over the hump, and it is amazing. And in case you're wondering, no, I do not file self-driving in this category, because self-driving really is super duper hard. But a remote control thing that merely knows I can stay level, and I can adjust when I'm mashed by the wind, and you can control where I go. We did get over that hump, and that is a much smaller hump, but even that one was so hard to get over that, for my entire childhood, the reason this is so amazing to me is that I saw people trying and failing again and again to do this, and now it's just like, probably anybody can make one of these, because the software idea, certainly the hardware, is so widely available that anybody could assemble this amount of hardware. Like, granted, maybe it wouldn't be as nice as this, it wouldn't be as good as this, and refined, and, so on and so forth. It's a hard problem, but like, the hardware that's in these drones is not super secret. That's why you can get one for a couple $100. And then the software seems like it's tractable enough that any company with reasonably good engineering resources can make a drone that flies successfully and can keep itself level and move around. And then it's just a question of who are the good drone makers or who are the bad ones or whatever. But the problem of fairly inexpensive thing that flies has more or less been solved by humanity, and that's why these drones are all over the place. In the same way that how can you get decent pictures from a phone sensor the size of your pinky nail, that computational photography stuff, to be able to pull reasonable pictures out of that was solved many years ago. Now we're all just iterating on it. So drones really are an amazing technology success story, and maybe my kids should be bored with them, but I will never be bored with them, because they just seem like, they seem like such an amazing triumph and such a sci-fi thing, because that's what it's like when you read sci-fi stories. The thing that's amazing is just the everyday thing in the background of the sci-fi story, and that's how you can tell it's the future. So I guess we're living in the future. I mean, we do have a pandemic after all.